We'll call the meeting to order. We'll note that all commissioners are present. And the first item of business is the order of business. Are there any changes to the order of business?
President Johnson, we'd like to recommend removal of item 4B from the agenda.
4B?
Yes, the
Okay.
pilot for Northern Place.
Any other changes? If not, the chair to entertain a motion to approve the order of business with the change mentioned.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have the motion and the second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. So the motion carries. Move to the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda you wish to discuss? If not, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move we approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion at all? Now, we'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. So we'll move to the non-timetable agenda. Item 4A has to do with Roars Prairie Winds Apartments, and Mr. Kessel will introduce that item.
Thank you, President Johnson. Roars is making an application to the North Dakota Housing Authority to obtain housing incentive or HIF funds on a 36-plex that's currently under construction in the West Ridge development. This apartment unit is north of Menards, and all 36 units would be available to essential service workers. The essential service worker title would include city staff, county, park and rec, hospital, and others. We have reviewed this application, or this letter of support, and it is our recommendation that the City Commission approves that letter. And I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kessel. Any comments or questions regarding this item? If not, would there be a motion regarding the letter of support?
Mr. President, I'd move we approve the letter of support.
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We'll move to item C then, and this has to do with the sales tax bond ordinance, and Attorney Wenko will introduce this item.
Yes, Mr. President. This ordinance is requested by the city's bond council. The city has funded the majority of its recent wastewater infrastructure projects through a loan from the state revolving loan funds. The majority of that loan is guaranteed by the net revenues from water and wastewater rates. However, a portion of that loan, not to exceed $10 million, is guaranteed by sales tax collections from the 0.5% sales tax. This ordinance provides the dedication of those sales tax revenues in order to pay the SRF loan. The city staff recommend approval.
Okay, thank you. And is this 1581?
1582, Mr. President.
1582, okay.
Oh, excuse me, it is 1581.
So I was right.
You
huh?
were. I was
All right.
testing you.
Well, I'll usually fail that test, but 1581, okay. So first off, if there's anyone from the audience that would like to comment regarding proposed ordinance 1581, you may do so now. Just come to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments. Anyone wish to comment on ordinance 1581? There's no one that wishes to comment on 1581. Any comments or questions by commissioners?
Make a motion to approve the ordinance.
I'll second.
We have the motion to approve first reading and the second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We'll go to item D. This is the tobacco license for Quick Vape, and Mr. Kessel will introduce this item.
Thank you, President Johnson. As you said, Quick Vape is located at 41 East Villard. This is commonly known as the former Ivanhoe Hotel. Tobacco licenses of this variety are unlimited, and are generally provided to businesses who meet all of our city requirements. That city requirement does include a state tobacco license, and that is been acquired. Quick Vape has also met all of our local requirements, and the city staff recommends approval.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kessel. Any comments or questions regarding this request? Chair to entertain a motion then.
Move to approve, Mr. Johnson.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner.
Aye.
Mr. Altman.
Aye.
Mr. Decker.
Aye.
Mr. Jackson.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so the motion carries. Brings us to the financial report, and Mr. Valesky will lead us through the financial report.
Thank you, President Johnson and members of the commission. First of all, I want to make sure everybody received a copy of the report. I heard there was the link wasn't working for everybody, so if everybody has one, okay. The report that we have here is, first of all, it's for the first quarter ending March 31st, 2015, and you have to bear with me on some of this stuff. I am going to claim the newbie thing here yet still for a while, and I am on a learning curve. What I tried to concentrate on the financial report is to making sure that the beginning budgeted numbers were correct and agreed to the 2015 budget numbers that were approved, and also the accuracy of the numbers that were reported. So I might not be able to explain all the numbers that are out there yet, and so, but I can certainly take questions and get back to you. I first wanted to talk just on page 2 of your report, just briefly. I don't even have this in the PowerPoint presentation. On page 2 of your report, on line 219, is the surge funds. I wanted just to point out that those funds were received in March, and they are the $44 million in that account. So those funds have been received and posted in there. So just wanted to show that. Moving on to page 3. In your report for the general fund, I wanted to talk briefly about some of the highlights of just the revenues that were there. We're currently right now have received about 23% of our revenues for the general fund, about $4.1 million. That being said, in our property taxes, we've collected about 82% so far at the $3.4 million, which is about a $400,000 increase to where we were last year at this time. If you look at the total revenues down below, we have a $4.1 million balance there. So as you can see, it's a decrease from where we were last year at this time, but that's because we have not done any transfers yet. And both in 13 and 14, there was the 4% of the future fund balance was transferred, and that transfer had not been posted yet in March. So that's why we're not seeing that amount in there.
Mr. Valesky, do you know what the difference in the other revenue sources is? 107,000, basically.
I'm sorry, pardon me?
Do you know what the difference in the other revenues? We have 26,000 this year. Last year we were at 133.
I don't at this point, but I can certainly find that out for you.
All right, thank you.
Mhm. Are there any other questions on that slide before I move on to the expenses?
If I could, Mr. Valesky, I can help with that a little bit. If you review on page 3 under other revenue, it generally includes interest and dividends that we've earned, special assessments, and then miscellaneous.
That's what I was just looking at, and I see last year 89,000, 2014 to date, and this year 16,000. More
Yep.
than likely that's where it's at.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Okay. On the expense side for the general fund, where right now we expended about $3.7 million, or 21% of our budgeted amount. That's about an $800,000 increase on where we were at last year in 2014. Reasons for those increases are in the general government side, there was an increase about $125,000. Under the public safety, there's about $260,000. And in the engineering and streets, about $400,000. The reasons for these are mainly in the capital area, or also there were some one-time charges that we could see in there. I did attach on the back of the report for you a breakdown of all of these so they'd be easy to see. So, for example, if you wanted to look at the engineering and streets at $400,000 on page 22, it lists everything that was happening in the streets area. And in there is like $181,000 for capital equipment that's been expended so far this year. And there was also a big expense in the first quarter for salt and de-icer. So those breakdowns are all in there. I try to attach as much a breakdown of these amounts so it can better answer any of the questions you may have. Moving on to the enterprise funds, we are showing for the wastewater, water and wastewater funds that the revenues we brought in so far is about $1.9 million, or 16% of the budgeted amount. And under expenses and capital outlay, expenses were $1.2 million, and our capital outlays were at $3.9 million. Which is about 43% of our total expenditures and capital outlays. Just wanted to note that those capital outlays at $3.9 million is about 81% of what was been expected this year. So a majority of those expenditures happen in this first quarter. Again, those are in the capital outlay area for equipment. And the stormwater, we brought in $46,000 in revenue, or 18% of the total expected, and then expenses of $29 million and capital outlays of $37 million, for a total of 26% of those expenses and capital outlays. And then lastly, in the solid water, there was solid waste, $1,025,000, or 21% of the expected revenues, and then we expended $487,000 in expenses and $342 in capital outlay, which is about 17% of those amounts. With the beginning cash balance in those areas of wastewater at $1.5 million, we're projected to be about $1.6 million negative in water and wastewater. And the reason for that is the payouts that we've been making for the wastewater treatment plant at this point. Stormwater, we're projecting to have an ending cash balance of $426, and solid waste at $2 million.
I know it's early in your tenure, but the capital expenditures, the major projects in the wastewater fund, should they be running through that fund, or should they be running through a capital fund, and should just the normal operating expenses be going through that fund? Do you have an opinion on that yet?
President Johnson, at this point, I know I have a number of questions that I'm trying to go through. I talked to Sean briefly about some of this stuff this morning, and that is a question that we need to look at to see what is the best way. At this point, I really don't have an opinion on it as of yet, but it's something we need to look at.
Okay. Because, you know, we're running literally close to $100 million worth of capital expenditures through that fund, and then.
Right. Understood.
Yeah. Okay.
Moving on to page 5 of your report, I talk about the 1% sales tax so far in March. Year-to-date collections so far have been about $1.4 million, which is a 21% decrease from where we were last year. And one of the main reasons that you're going to see this in all of them is the timing of when it was coming in. Is the revenues this year, as I'm understanding it, are coming in at the very, very end of the tail end of each month, so they're not being captured. So that's why you're seeing that difference between the 2 months, the 2 years, because I believe we're missing one month of some of those collections.
You have 2 months worth of data for 2015 compared to 3 months worth of data in the prior.
That's correct. In 14 there was 3 months.
That was an ongoing issue with our auditors over the past several years, when to recognize those revenues, and I think the auditors finally won out and insisted that we couldn't just recognize it on a cash basis when they came in. So I think if you continue that way, you'll have an issue when 2015 is being audited.
Okay, well, President
think-
Johnson, I'll look into that. I know we talked about it this morning, and because I questioned, and I do have reports if you guys want to see those. I didn't get those in time to attach to the financials, but the yearly and month-to-month collections, I do have that report if you want that. And we were missing the first month, and that's what I was told is that. So we need to look at that.
If you're missing the first month, it either should have been posted at 2014. And any rate, it was, since we operate on more of a cash basis, that when we receive it, that's when we'd want to post it. I think they had us change that some time ago, but I looked at the numbers because they're available through the state treasurer's office. Looked to me like through the first 3 months we're running between 12 and 13% ahead of a year ago when you compare the accounting, with the accounting being consistent with the prior 2 years, I think.
President Johnson, I think you're accurate. May even be a little light according to a recent news report, but it did have the city of Dickinson exceeding all other cities' increase in year over year. I also like to just mention we did have a change in the timing of those receipt of payments from the state, and it's now a week later than it used to be. I'm not sure if that'll affect our reporting or not, but that we did have a change.
Well, that's it. President Johnson, that's a good question, and we're working with auditors right now. That are auditing our 2014, so we'll talk to them about that and make sure we're getting the way it needs to be done. So right now, our projecting ending cash balance there is $10.9 million. We started out with a beginning cash of 9.2. For that's a 17.4% increase from last fiscal year. These next 3 slides, if you're looking at your report on page 5, there is an anomaly here that we have to work on and do a correcting entry. There is about a $1,176,000 that is listed on your report for unobligated year-end cash on hand, and I know what those dollar amounts are by each account, so they need to be taken out of there. And but I wanted this report to actually balance to the report you're looking at, or excuse me, this PowerPoint presentation to agree with what you're looking at here. So there will be some adjusting entries that are going to be going through next month. For this first one on the 50% share, the year-to-date collections are $715,000. And again, since it's 50% of the 1% sales tax, you're going to see that same 21.3% decrease. And same with the interest revenue. We're projecting right now about $4.7 million of revenues coming in. And that number is about $722,000 too high, and that's the adjusting entry that we need to make to correct the report that you received. And then we haven't had any year-to-date expenses, but so far we're projected our expenses of $4 million in the annual street projects. And so we're looking at an ending cash balance about $7.6 million. And again, that number is going to be closer to 6.9 once that correcting entry is done.
So we had budgeted a transfer of $4 million to the street fund?
That's correct.
Okay.
On the 20% share, so far we've collected $286,000. Again, that's the 20% of that 1% sales tax. And our year-to-date expenses so far are $269,000, and that's mainly in the job development, the Stark development for $175,000, the senior citizen programs for $85,000, and then the job creation senior citizens for $9,098. We're looking at having an ending cash balance there of about $1.5 million. As you can see in the total year-to-date expenses there at the $1.3 million, we're down by $81,000, or excuse me, 81%, excuse me, from that 7.5, and that 7.5, what that included last year was the, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped ahead here, I apologize. On the 30% share, does anybody have any questions on the 20%? I apologize for that. On the 30% share here, again, we've collected about $429,000 in revenues, and our total expenses are projected to be at that $1.3 million, and that's about 81% under the 7.5 that was collected from last year. Last year we had a $6 million payment for the community center, and also a $786,000 bond payment that was included in there, as well as about $250,000 for maintenance. Our ending cash balance in this account, as you can see, is going up from $98,000 to about $1.5 million. On the 0.5% sales tax in March, we've collected $715,000 so far this year, which again is about 21.3% below last year. Our total revenues are projected being at $4.1 million, which is about just under our last year's total amount, and our total expenses are projected at being at $4,015,000, which is about 13% under what we were planning on spending last year at this time. So our ending cash balance here is actually going up 16%, from $1 million to $1.17 million. Moving on to page 6 of your report is the hospitality tax. So far this year, we've collected $208,000, a difference of 21.9% from last year, where we collected $266,000. Our total revenues are projected at being spent at just over $1 million, and again, that's about a 16.8% decrease from last year. Our total expenses are projected at being at $801,000, which is about 13.7% down from last year. So overall, we're showing about a 44.5% increase in our ending cash balance for hospitality tax. Continuing on that same page is the occupancy tax. Again, here we've collected $100,000. And we're about 31.3% below from what we collected last year at this time. Total revenues are projected at being at 560,000, and we're about 28% below that right and at this time. Total expenses are at $574,000, which is an increase about 8.7, and then our ending cash balance is staying pretty close to the same. It's going down about 2.7%. And then lastly, on the street projects, our year-to-date revenues are $26,700, which from last year at this time it was $486,000. Our total revenues are projected to being at 4.1, which is about an 8.8% decrease from our 2004. And our total expenditures are at 3.6 million, which are about a 60.7% decrease from our 2014 expenses.
I do have a comment on this. I think you need to review 2014. We either ran a street project through here that should have been counted as an oil impact project, or we missed transferring some oil impact money, I think, into this fund. I think it's likely the first item where we ran the project through, but we meant to fund it by oil impact monies. But whatever, if I'm mistaken, I think prior to the end of the year, we have to figure out how we bring this fund into balance, and it's either by transferring more oil impact money into it, or some general fund money, or some additional sales tax money. But this is a fund that you'll want to at least have a zero balance in by the end of the year. I'm sure you probably have already come to that conclusion then.
Oh, President Johnson, no, yes, we agree. I actually had this conversation with Mr. Kessel this morning about that, and yes, we do need to look into that to see at that fund. So with that, that's all that I have is for the presentation, but I wanted to ask for in the future if you guys would if the commission would please let me know about any kind of suggestions or comments on what kind of reporting you would like. I left everything basically the same from the last report that I believe that you received from here, and there's a few modifications and stuff I would like to make, but if there's any suggestions or comments from the commission, I would certainly like to hear about that. What I'd like to do is make sure we're presenting the financial information on a accurate and relevant way for the commission to review and make sure I'm meeting all your needs.
Thank you, Mr. Valesky. Is there any immediate feedback from commissioners?
Mr. President, I haven't had a chance to review the entire report you sent out, but in our prior reports, we used to have a breakdown of the 1% and the 0.5% on a monthly basis. Can we continue that?
Commissioner Steiner, I actually have those right over here. I can pass those out to you.
Yep. Okay. So they'll be included in the month?
Yes, I
All right.
didn't get those out in time to include in the packet.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other comments? Well, I haven't had a chance to look through this either, but just reviewing a couple of pages, I can see where you've provided a lot more detail than we're accustomed to getting, and I think that'll be very welcome, so thank you.
All right, thank you.
I guess the one other thing I'd like to mention, and I think it's down the list in priorities, but I'd like to see a little more tracking on our CIP. I'd like to see where we stand as we estimated the cost on those projects, where we are with them. You know, that was a pretty wild thing the last couple of years, and I would hope we could get our arms around that. But that's got to come after we get caught up on this stuff.
All right.
And I think you're going to find that as you're reconstructing what went through, what happened in 2014 and maybe even in prior years, that those major water and wastewater projects shouldn't be running through the day-to-day operating fund. Otherwise, it's so difficult to track them. Plus, it's hard to tell how if the fund is standing on its own, meaning that any rate increases we made, is this covering our operating expenses, and what part of the debt service can it cover? You know, I think most of us are expecting that the wastewater fund and water fund won't be able to cover a full loaded debt service, but hopefully it can cover, 30% or 40, 50%, something like that. So,
President Johnston, I agree with you.
Yeah.
We'll look into that and see what we can do.
and we know you've only been here a few weeks, so you've done a lot just to get this, so thank you.
All right, thank you.
Would there be a motion to accept the financial report as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Is there other discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. It's 5 o'clock. We have a timetable agenda item at that time, and that's to hear the presentation of the Dickinson Convention and Visitors Bureau Annual Report. So, welcome, Director Terry Thiel.
Good evening. I believe you got the packs that I sent out for the annual report that we print each year. We send those out to all of our stakeholders and throughout the state, actually, to some of our representatives. We've seen a lot of changes, of course, as everybody else has seen in the city. Some of the things that we do, when we first start in the report, of course, is doing some of our annual marketing pieces that we do, whether they're in print or digital, things that are distributed in the city or within things that we mail out. Our 35,000 guides to the city, our 15,000 tariff maps, relocation packets and such. So a lot of those we do every single year. But one of the things that we did this last year too, I wanted to point out, was that we partnered with some DSU business students, and we did a survey. We sent out 2,000 surveys to qualified leads. These are leads that people who had actually asked for information. They were through Midwest Living magazine or AAA, different things like that, One Fulfillment. So we know that they had gotten information and they asked for for our information. So when we got back the information, you can kind of see, we look at the months that they travel, our demographics, and that does reflect some of the other things that we do, and some other things that we have related back to North Dakota tourism surveys and such. But we know they're going by car, they're staying in the hotels. Medora is their #1 purpose, and of course going after that is the Enchanted Highway Dakota Dinosaur Museum. So we thought this was pretty effective because we really do want to see if that information is getting out and if people are using it. So that's one thing that we did. Last year we also did a radio promotion across the eastern North Dakota, and we co-op with the former West River Regional Tourism Council on the availability on the weekends. We were quite busy during the summer, but our weekends were quite open, so we did that throughout the summer months. We placed a digital airport kiosk out at the airport this last year. People are able to touch the kiosk for different things, much like our computers, and then it draws directly off of our own website, so they can hit into where they want to see for lodging, the dining, different things. We also put in the air flight information on that too, so they can see exactly what's departed and what's arriving, and then the weather also in several different cities. We updated our branding a little bit. You can see there's a little bit different font for the Bleeding Cowboy font that's on there, and we've used that in a lot of our different materials. And then, of course, we did, and we do this probably at least every other year, we try to do a different photo shoot and hire somebody to come in. And this last year, we directed a lot of it towards Prairie Outpost Park, the Yoakum Regional Museum, and then also downtown. So we picked some unique retail stores that were downtown. We did that a few years ago too, but we did update and freshen up that look. You're going to see a lot on our online marketing that's gone up. There's been a dramatic increase in that. And part of that is due to, we've also placed Facebook ads. We have to do some paid advertising. It's getting to be, you do your paid advertising through print materials and such. And so we've started to do that, and that really did make a big increase. You'll see that 118% increase on Facebook, which converts over to Twitter. So those numbers are the same, but we use a program that will convert it right over to that. So we've been real pleased in that, but that, of course, is something that we have to keep real diligent on. Julie in our office does all the social media. We just started to do Instagram also. So that's been a market that we haven't had, 5 to 6 years ago, really. That's very new for us. So we've been pretty happy with the results. Financials are in there, and then the next page you'll see our visitor services. We're down for walk-ins this last year about 27% from 2013. We had a big influx of people that were coming in 11 and 12, and also coming in 13. And a lot of those coming in, we're looking for job service and seeing the billboard out there for information. So we saw a decrease in that, but I don't think that that's anything, alarming with that. It's just that a lot of those people coming in were looking for job placement. You can also see the information that we sent out, about 1,848 direct requests out of our office that we did for packets, and then of course we have one fulfillment and other ones. So about 13,625 requests were sent out directly. We also painted the offices last year. It hadn't been painted since they've been constructed, so now we have new colors and it's been freshened up there inside. The meetings and reunions, group travel, we hosted several large ones. North Dakota Petroleum Council was a large one that we had, over 600 delegates in for that for several days. North Dakota Stockmen's Association, and there were some other ones along with that too. Changes in some of the industry. Of course, we've added some things. Savannah Suites changed over to Red Roof Inn, and of course some of the different restaurants that are opening. The room count last year stayed the same. Of course, we've seen the Candlewood that has completed now in 15. That'll be added to the numbers. And then the one north of town also will be added. But we were up a little bit last year in occupancy, 71.5% compared to 63.9% the year before. Then I listed the city occupancy tax, hospitality tax, and then also the gross revenue for lodging and the food and beverage. I did back out the 1% on that food beverage gross revenue for that. The event grant program, of course, we administer that every year, and there's $60,000 that we use for different events that come in, make an application. They have to complete an evaluation, and their costs that they incurred once they've completed everything. Activities in the community, there's different things. We participate with the high school leadership team. We did an energy roundtable last year, Stark Development and Stark Billings County Extension. Old Red, Old 10 Scenic Byway, we're involved with that with the different communities between Stark County and also Morton County. And then we were also chosen last year as a Small Town USA, and that was a live interview with Preston Scott, and that was out of Tallahassee, Florida. So we were chosen for Community for the Day. Staff is listed in the back. And our board. I am going to pass out one. We have our marketing report that I included to you, and of course there's a lot of national magazines that we do. This one here I'll just make, I'll hand that out over here real quickly. That's a new one this year. That is based on looking at the market for 50 and above. In there, you're also going to see that there's an article with the Enchanted Highway in there. And then the second page talks about it, the highway sculptures, but you also see one of the examples of the ads that we do, that one that shows the hiking with that. We try to do as many of them that have the qualified leads as what we can. That's our best direct return to know if people are actually asking for information. And there's quite a few more. What we do is a lot of them, you don't see it because it does go out. It's into Midwest Living Magazine, all things. We follow North Dakota Tourism Division. We attend the meetings and we work with them very, very closely. So the magazines and a lot of the online marketing, we make sure we have partners in that to help us direct us to the direct markets that they're looking at and what they do for their marketing. So I would sure be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Steele? I have a question. One of the things that we heard, you know, prior to the decline in oil prices were that room rates were so high that for kind of the ordinary events like a softball tournament and things like that, people didn't really want to come because the cost of staying overnight in Dickinson was high. With the drop in occupancy, have we seen room rates moderate, and are we having more success with things like softball tournaments and so forth?
Yeah, yes, there has been a drop in the ADR, the average daily rate, for leisure and business travel. And in particular, when we have the conventions or the sporting events, that'll be a group rate. And that has really declined to the point that we're able to be a lot more competitive.
Okay,
We've been very pleased with that, and it has been a much better bid.
good. And then kind of a follow-up, you know, we're 4.5 months into the new year. Do you have a sense of how our occupancy will turn out this year?
We've seen an increase in the leisure travel last 2 years coming back, actually. I do think it's going to be softer than what we'd ever seen, you know. Those 2 years were just actually an anomaly. I mean, that just wasn't going to come back to those high occupancies or rates. And I think it's going to start to become a market that we can market even better, you know, for the leisure traveler coming in. We have to get over the perception now of the high rates and the no occupancy. We tried to do a lot of that in our both print and with the radio, that there's rooms available. And if you look at the billboard, we changed that out. We did that last year. We had the visitor information billboard, and now we switched it back out that there are rooms available to spread the word. So those two things are the message we really have to get out. And I think that we're not going to see the extreme high rates that we had seen before, and I don't think we're going to see the extreme high occupancy rates that we saw those couple years.
What would be kind of a normal occupancy rate that, say, a healthy industry could expect? But, you know, I agree, not
Yeah.
like we had 90% there.
Yeah.
So,
On a US,
Yeah.
if you're happy with the 65, 64%,
is that
year end, you know,
65% would be healthy?
it would.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's probably not what every hotel manager or owner wants to see. Obviously, they'd like to see it higher.
Yeah.
I mean, they would, you know, but on an average for the US, that's overall about what it is.
They'd like to see it push 100%, I suppose, but, yeah, but what's healthy in the industry?
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions? All right, thank
Okay.
you for
Mhm,
being here.
Thank you.
We have a 5:15 timetable item. It's a special use permit, and our new planning director, Walt Hadley, will introduce this.
Yes, thank you, President. Northern Place, it's a request for a multifamily special use permit to allow affordable housing. It's an affordable housing project. It had 6 conditions of approval from the Planning Commission. Staff has approved it, and there hasn't been any public comment.
Okay, you've heard Mr. Hadley's introduction and staff's recommendation. Are there any comments or questions regarding the special use permit by commissioners? This is an ordinance, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It also has a zone change later on in the agenda that's tied to it.
So, is this an ordinance? It says on the agenda it is, or is it just simply we're approving or denying a special use permit request?
Mr. President, this is actually a resolution.
Okay. So it's,
The zone change would be the ordinance later on.
yeah, I don't think our enclosure has a resolution. I think it just has the application. Oh, I found a resolution right at the very end. A long ways down. Yeah, that's, actually, you, Mr. Kessel, you could help me out. That's been a fairly regular occurrence where we're mixing up resolutions and ordinances on the agenda here, and I know you guys are busy, but it would help to get that right.
We'll pay special attention.
Okay, so this would be, this is our first resolution, so I'm assuming it's number 22?
Yes, Mr. President, 22, 2015.
22, 2015, okay. Did you as commissioners get a chance to review that? Or were you like me and didn't find it till now?
We had this, Mr. President, at Planning and Zoning, of course.
Okay. Maybe
And
you,
there were some concerns about paving of adjacent streets. That's been taken care of. I think that was I believe that was a condition of the SUP at Planning and Zoning. And I don't think there was anything else significant. It was pretty routine.
okay. And there were no comments at planning and zoning? All right. So, is there a motion regarding resolution 22-2015?
I'll move approval of the resolution.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so the motion carries. And, well, it's not quite 5:20, so we'll go down to item F on the non-timetable agenda item, or a non-timetable agenda, period. And item F is a proclamation regarding Dickinson Day Without Violence. I'll go ahead and read that. Whereas Dickinson does not have a day to commemorate and encourage nonviolence, and whereas other cities have established days and weeks to celebrate nonviolence, and whereas Dickinson values and strives for neighborhoods free from the harmful effects of violence, and whereas Dickinson prides itself on being a leader and example to other communities, and whereas Day Without Violence is committed to having each city within North Dakota proclaim a citywide day without violence on September 29th. And whereas Day Without Violence is committed to having each state proclaim a statewide day without violence on or about September 30th. And whereas Day Without Violence is committed to having the United States proclaim a nationwide day without violence on October 1st, to be known as the National Day Without Violence. And whereas North Dakota, along with the rest of these United States, can join with other nations to celebrate on October 2nd, the United Nations International Day of Nonviolence. Now therefore, I, Dennis W. Johnson, President of Dickinson City Commission, do hereby proclaim Tuesday, September 29th, 2015, as the Dickinson Day Without Violence. Just add to that, it'd be okay if the other 364 days would be without violence also, so. Are there any objections to me signing this proclamation? Well, I'll go ahead and sign it then. And we'll send it down to the city administrator to attest the signature. All right, we'll go back to the timetable agenda, and our final timetable agenda item is the designated urban service area, and Planning Director Hadley will introduce this also.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. This is a requested amendment to the urban service area map of the Dickinson Comprehensive Plan. The Planning Commission and city staff recommend approval. You do have, there's an ordinance draft amendment in your packet. It is obviously for the school. There hasn't been any public comment on this item either.
Okay, can you add a little more information on what area this is involving?
Yeah, why don't you go? I'll let Stephen do that just because he's he's much more familiar with it than I am.
All right.
Steve Josephson, City County Planner. This is an area. It's to the west of State Avenue, south of 21st Street. Most of that area is currently owned by the NDSU extension. Then there's a portion of it that's referred to as the Philippi property. And the idea was to bring there's going to be an annexation coming up that covers the same area. So it's that approximately 277 acre area. Someone was just pointing it out with their laser pointer over there, but it's that rectangular piece over here, over there. When the comprehensive plan was performed, even though it's not in the urban service area, there were water and sewer estimates that were done for that, so no new ones needed to be done. And with the school wanting to build there, and also the extension wanting to put that land up for sale, this was the time to go ahead and fill in that spot over there. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for the explanation. So this is an ordinance, is it 1582?
That's correct, Mr. President.
So if there's anyone from the public who would like to comment regarding this proposed ordinance 1582, you may do so now. Just come to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments. Anybody wish to comment? No one from the public that wishes to comment. Any comments or questions by city commissioners? Not, is there a motion regarding the first reading of 1582?
Make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, then we'll vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. So the motion carries. We'll go back to the non-timetable agenda. Item G is the taxi cab ordinance. This was reported on at the prior meeting, so Mr. Kessel will let you introduce this item now.
Thank you, President Johnson. Attorney Wenko and I met with several taxi cab owners, the airport manager, and a representative from Public Transit. We reviewed and revised the taxi cab ordinance as it is before you. This meeting was very beneficial, and we did make some changes. We expect that there'll be additional changes before the second and final reading, assuming that you approve first reading this evening. We hope to have a final draft before the public hearing that will be scheduled at our June 1st City Commission meeting. And Attorney Wenko will actually point out some of the highlights of the ordinance this evening. So I'd like to turn the table over to her.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President, Commissioners, as Mr. Kessel had indicated, there were several revisions, even several revisions from the initial draft. As you will see, there are two subsections. After our meeting with the taxi cab representatives, it became apparent that it was necessary to divide this into subsections, one for the business owners who operate the taxi cabs and one for the chauffeurs or the drivers essentially that are operating these taxi cabs as well. So as you move through the prepared ordinance, as you will see, section 3404 deals with the taxi cab licensing procedures of the business owner applicant. Based upon the conversations with the taxi cab representatives, business owners, the parent that age 21 was the age that we all felt was appropriate for the applicants to be of 21 years of age. As you move farther down into the ordinance, in subsection 3 of that subsection I just mentioned, a lot of discussion was had with the types of maintenance and how you can, or what types of zones can you operate a taxi cab business out of. There was issues or concerns, did it need to be in a commercial or industrial zoned type of district? So a lot of discussion was had, a lot of useful and beneficial discussion was had with the taxi cab representatives on that matter. And as you move farther down into the ordinance, section 340405 deals with the chauffeuring license procedures for the driver applicants. And that is a little bit different than the business owner applicants, but again, both sets of individuals would be required to have a license. It just seemed appropriate that those drivers are also being required to have a license as well. And then the other substantial change came with the actual schedule of fares. A lot of discussion was had with that about a proposed schedule. Mr. Kessel, I believe, has received a proposed schedule from the taxi cab industry representatives, and that is being discussed. The other, and there are some other revisions in here, but the other significant change came with the bus or omnibus portion of the ordinance. As proposed from the previous draft, a lot of that language in there is antiquated and outdated. And so what we've done is we have added requirements for the bus and omnibus applicants to also have the schedule of fares, as well as a portion for what happens to deal with their revocation of licenses, as well as insurance coverages, and to up those amounts. So those are more appropriate considering the circumstances and limits now, as opposed to 1950 when this thing was originally drafted. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Winkle. Are there questions or comments?
Mr. President, a couple clarifications here. On the taxi cab licensing procedure, the 3404.040, B7, and I need to get back up to that here. The insurance limits you show are 500,000 and 500,000. Let me find that here.
Mr. Commissioner, I believe it's, the limit should be 500,000 for injury or damages to one person and not less than 1.5 million for injury or damage in one accident.
That was the point I was going to bring up, because down on the chauffeur licensing procedures, the 340450, you do have the 500 per person with the 1.5 million total payment, basically. So I'm not so sure we shouldn't be consistent with either 5 and 5 or the 5 and 1.5. And that's where I was at before. I was way down at the bottom on the omnibus, and I think you have the 500 and the 1.5 limit in the insurance section there also. So I think we need to be consistent in those three areas. I would be interested in knowing if the taxi cab owners are having any problem getting the 1.5 million combined, or the aggregate limit. You are, would you like to come up to the front?
I believe the state of North Dakota actually has a $1,500,000 and $1 million in aggregate damage. That's what our insurance company makes us carry. So it's a total of $2.5 million.
The total is 2.5?
We have 1 million and something, 500,000 and something else, and 1 million in aggregate.
Right.
For aggregate
And
damage.
that's where I think this is kind of getting a little confusing. I would expect to see a split limit of 500,000 each person, not to exceed an aggregate of 500,000 each aggregate, or 1 million on the aggregate. or you could have the 1 million per person, not to exceed 1 million aggregate with an umbrella coverage of 1 million. So
I think the question you had, though, for them, are you having trouble getting insurance right
that's
now?
correct.
There is only currently one company in the state that actually insures taxi cab and livery vehicles in the state of North Dakota, and it is a company called National Indemnity, and they are broked through a company called Northern States Agency out of Minnesota, and those are the only, you can
Yeah.
only go through them.
And have you had trouble getting coverage with them?
We-
I'm aware of those companies. I know who the brokerage company is and the National Indemnity, the insurance company. My concern is I don't know if you guys are having success getting those limits.
Yeah, we actually have National Indemnity. This is what was explained to me by the broker. Northern States Agency is required by law and by their state insurance license, because they carry commercial insurance, to know the state minimums for those insurances. And taxi cabs in the state of North Dakota are required to carry commercial liability insurance in the amounts of 1,500,000 and 1 million. And so that's the only thing they'll write that policy for, is that minimum. They won't write it for anything else. You can't get it for anything else. They write it to state, not city.
Mr. President, we can approve this first reading tonight, but I think we need to sit down and take a look at that, because we're talking a couple different things here. We're talking about a general liability policy with different limits, which I don't know if you
I
just
actually,
talked about. I don't see it addressed, and then we also need to talk about the vehicle limits on the other side. So,
Well, no, it's not a general liability. It's a general commercial auto liability policy. The general liability policy is something entirely different. That's something you
that's
get on
correct.
your office or your equipment but we have, like for us, and Rita actually has a copy of the certificate. We brought it in yesterday, and it shows the minimums that it has on it. But
Mr. President, I would like to sit in on the next meeting to take a look at
Yeah, I think that's something we want to make sure that we have straight. If there's really only one company that's going to write, they might be good for us to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. Two, are we subject to some Century Code provisions here, requirements? I mean, we have to do at least a minimum of what the Century Code would require, if it requires anything. And,
That's correct, Mr. President.
and so was this all research prior?
A lot of this draft was based on Mr. Colling's initial draft, and then what I had done was basically taken the notes that we had taken from the representatives meeting and added it to here. A lot of I cannot say for certain if the amounts that we've included in here for, subsection 5 for the insurance coverages is in compliance, or I shouldn't say that, but if it meets the Century Code requirement, I don't know if there is any. I would have to look it up.
Okay.
I think that also National Casualty through Berkshire Hathaway is actually getting ready to represent the market. I got a call from the bank the other day stating that they were going to have another insurer in the next 3 months, so.
Okay.
But I think we ought to take Mr. Steiner up on his request, since he's in the insurance business, that as you're writing that section, we use his expertise. And
Just for clarification, when you talk about Northern States, that's just a broker, like a business is selling tennis shoes. And that business selling tennis shoes might sell Adidas. Northern States sells National Indemnity.
Well, National Indemnity is actually the only company licensed to provide taxi cab insurance in the state of North Dakota.
Through a broker.
Through a broker, through an underwriter, and then the underwriter goes through the broker. I know nothing about insurance. Again, it's very confusing to me. I know that we don't actually go through Northern States. We go through Bank of the West, and then Bank of the West goes through Northern States, and then they go through National Indemnity, so however that pyramid. They all get a commission.
Mr. Kessel.
President Johnson, as we've stated, we don't expect that this document is in its final form. We'll get this part right. This, I think, is a fairly easy section to get right, and there's been concerns expressed about this section with current license holders, so we'll make sure that Commissioner Steiner's involved and we get it right.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, since we kind of informally started the public comment area, I'll just formally declare public comment is open on, what is the number of this ordinance? Is it 1583? So,
That's correct, Mr. President.
okay. So if there's anyone from the public that wants to comment on the proposed ordinance, you may do so now. Just come to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments. And remind you that we are also going to hold a public hearing, as Mr. Kessel said. So should the first reading pass tonight, there will be a public hearing with no action taken that night, and then perhaps a meeting 2 weeks after the public hearing, or 4 weeks from now, we would hope to take final action on it. But we certainly want to go slow enough that we consider all the important points. But if there's anyone that wishes to comment on it now, you may do so.
My name is Megan Patrick, and I am the co-owner of eCab and Dickinson Yellow Cab. And we've been servicing the Dickinson area for 3+ years now, hopefully successfully, some days not. I just wanted to say thank you guys again for doing this for us. We really, really appreciate it. It's not very often that you have businesses come to a city and say, please regulate us. We see huge problems every day that aren't going away. They're just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And they're not problems with competing entities, they're problems with public safety. And that to us damages our industry. And as your city grows, taxi cabs become a cornerstone of your transportation. They're not like buses. You call a taxi cab, it shows up in 5 to 10 minutes, and it takes you where you want to go directly, as opposed to having to sit on a city bus for 45 minutes and wait. Every aspect of taxi cab regulation is ultimately related to a public safety factor. There is no portion of it that ever isn't. And like I told Sean Kessel when we first met, 90% of taxi regulation is reactive, not proactive. And so what we've done here is we've tried to be proactive instead of reactive. So we're trying to stop the problems before you have somebody getting raped or somebody getting killed in a car accident because some guy is driving erratically drunk in a taxi cab. I do have a couple of points, though, and I think that you guys should kind of look at these. I actually have something to show you guys. I brought it. I know that Sean said that he did not want to issue a license for taxi cabs, but I have an argument supporting a license, and I think you should hear it. You can't tell who should and who should not be driving a taxi cab if a police officer pulls them over and requests to see their chauffeur's license, and they're in a taxi cab and they don't have this, they go to jail, and they get a huge fine. This costs $5 to make. These are very, very important. Every city that has any kind of licensing requirement requires a chauffeur to carry a valid chauffeur's license. It tells this tells the public that I've been through a safety training course that allows me to drive a taxi effectively, efficiently, and safely. It tells the public that I know how to deter robberies. It tells the public that I know first aid CPR. If somebody has problems in the back of my car, it tells the public that I know my duty as a public transit provider, because taxi cabs are public transportation. Whether or not they're privately owned, or sometimes city owns the taxi cabs, airports own taxi cabs, but they're a public safety vendor. When people come to Dickinson and they've never been here before, about 80% of the time they get off the plane and they get in a taxi cab, and we're the first people they see when they come to your city. If they get in a cab that doesn't have commercial insurance and gets in a wreck on the way, that doesn't make the city look good at all. So for us, this request, it's hard for us to make because we know that it's going to cost us money, It's gonna effectively hinder our ability to operate. We're gonna be stymied for a little while. Everybody's gonna lose drivers, people are gonna hurt, there are gonna be drivers that don't meet the requirements for the city. But that's all in the name of public safety. But one of the major things I wanted to bring up tonight, actually, so that as you guys are reading this, you understand where I'm coming from. Mr. Kessel, we had an argument about this. Branding is what they call taxi cab color scheming. It is a law in 90% of the place. I mean, you can look it up everywhere. It's called branding. Proper decaling and marking is one of the biggest problems we've noticed in Dickinson. I get calls from customers saying they got in an unmarked white taxi cab that happened to be a van with a male driver and they lost their cell phone. Did you get a name? No, it said taxi. This is not okay. This should not occur. There should be, our decals cost $167 to put on the car. It's not an unreasonable cost. Our paint costs $300. We paint our cars for $300. It's not an unreasonable cost to require this. And it creates the public, you guys are able to recognize a taxi. When somebody calls you and says, I got in a bright green taxi cab, because that's all people know. They get out, they get in a yellow cab, they get in a green cab, they get in a blue cab. That's all they recognize. They don't see the numbers on the cabs. Half the time they can't even tell you whether it was a male or female driver, they're so drunk. But they remember the color of that car. So I would really caution you guys to put something in here. You don't have to do paint, but something with proper markings and decals to identify the company with which these guys are driving for. Because what ends up happening is they're completely unidentifiable cabs. And I think I also had one more thing for you guys. Also, Sean was saying something about an insurance, or not an insurance, but inspection for the vehicle. On every taxi cab in the US, they have these nifty little seals on the windows. They're also really cheap. They cost like $3 to print. And it says City of New York Transportation Commission Licensing Authority, and it gives an effective date. And you stick those stickers on the windshield. And when a customer walks up to the taxi, they know that that taxi is registered and regulated by the city. And they know that that taxi has been inspected and sealed by the city. And that's another thing I would just kind of, they're real cheap things to do, and they're super, super effective. Also makes it easy. A police officer walks up to a taxi cab, it doesn't have the seal on the windshield, and they instantly know that cab hasn't been to you guys. They don't have to wait for them to produce or say, I lost my paperwork. It's all right there. But that's all I have for you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments or questions for Ms. Patrick? So I want to, see if I understand. So you're suggesting that the city issue chauffeur licenses?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And requirements to get a chauffeur's license would be, one thing would be like taking a safety class?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually, just to not kind of put the city out, you can talk next. I'm kicking him out of here. One of the things that I would like to point out about the chauffeur's licensing class, you just turned on the monthly financial report,
Oh, wow, sorry.
is you have two people here in Dickinson that work for, I'm one of them, but there's a gentleman that owns another company that also has taught the chauffeur's class in a major U.S. city.
Oh, okay, but chauffeur classes are available here in the city?
No, we were gonna ask Sean, actually, to allow us to host one, and we would be willing to do it for free. And we would be willing to teach the class as a requirement of a license for Dickinson.
On an ongoing basis?
Mm-hmm, yep,
Okay.
yep, and we've actually talked to the Chamber of Commerce, who has graciously offered us their conference room 2 weekends a month, or 2 weeks a month, on a Wednesday, I think. But-
And in addition, excuse me, but in addition to the taking the safety class, I think you said there were some other driver requirements that you were suggesting. I didn't quite catch them.
Just the driver safety, usually what the driver safety class is, it's all rolled into one chauffeur
Okay.
class.
So it's, okay. And then the last thing well, not the last thing, but that city should require all cabs to be branded, have
Yep.
some sort of.
In
gen-
some way.
And then the last thing, are you suggesting or requesting that the city be responsible for inspecting the mechanical soundness of the cabs?
No. The only thing in here, it already requires an inspection that's supposed to be kept on file with the city, and the inspection report is to be maintained in the car.
And is that done by someone in the private sector?
I believe it says it is.
Okay.
It's just an outside mechanic, but, usually what happens is you go to an outside mechanic that bids on a contract or does whatever.
Right.
And then you get the inspection notice, you take it into the city issues you a seal for your window.
And because an outside mechanic has certified that.
That it's an inspectable vehicle.
Okay, all right, I got it.
And usually cities require you to go to a DOT inspection, somebody that has the ability to inspect semi-trucks.
Okay, all right.
They give us the right.
And these are things that are not yet in this ordinance?
That actually is.
That is, okay.
The only thing that wasn't was the seal sticker on the windshield. I would seriously, that's just a really easy kicker for you guys. It's real easy to identify if the taxi cab doesn't have it. If they don't have it on their window and they should, you can say, hey, you need to put that sticker on your windshield right now, I'm gonna fine you.
Okay, and then I have an unrelated question. It's related to taxis, but not to this. You know, you've been here, you said 3 years. We've now, we've had this decline in oil prices. Have you seen a decline in business along with oil prices? Can you?
We have a little bit. My company does a lot with private nursing companies in the hospital,
Okay.
but I think everybody's seen a decrease.
A little
in-
softness in the market?
Yeah, it's been slower, definitely.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you for taking the time to listen. We know it's a pain.
It's what we do. Is there anyone else that would like to comment?
Hello, I'm Bernie Marsh. I own the Esquire Club downtown. I just have a question that sort of came to my mind as listening to all this, and I was just wondering if limousine services or party buses fall anywhere under this ordinance.
Ms. Winkle, can you address that one?
Yes, they would.
Did you want more than just a yes or no answer? But they do.
Yes, they do.
Yes, they do.
Yes, they do. The term bus or omnibus is defined in the ordinance as an automobile or vehicle propelled by the use of gasoline or other power with a seating capacity of carrying 7 to 14 passengers for compensation or hire within the corporate city limits.
Okay. Anybody else wish to comment?
Good afternoon, President Johnson. My name's Marvin Dill. My wife owns Sober Bus, Camager Services and Shuttle. And the question that I have is on the business of parking the taxis in a residential area. It says there where you can't do a fleet. More than 2 taxis is a fleet, am I correct? And the biggest share of these people don't have the finances to have a business, a brick and mortar building to park their vehicles at. And with that saying, there's other companies like, I'm going to say Halliburton, Baker Hughes, or whoever have their company employees drive their pickups home at night and they stay in the same housing, so there's more than 2 vehicles there. So would that apply to them too?
Yeah, well, there's a question. Mr. Kessel or Ms. Winkle?
Their vehicles are not for hire. They're not tracking people down for payment, so those vehicles would be exempt from this ordinance. And we did add and change it to, to reflect fleet, so that there was definitely consensus amongst all of the people in attendance that requiring a specific building for each of these cabs to locate their business out of would probably bankrupt them all. And so as a recognition of not providing that, they also agreed that a cab or a bus could be parked at a residence of either the owner or of one of the staff members of those companies, but not more than one. And so it was our attempt by putting fleet in there to nullify any more than one vehicle at a particular residence so that the surrounding residences aren't impaired in any way, or at least minimally impaired.
So, Mr. Dill, in your case, your family's business has more than one vehicle?
Yes,
That's
we
the
have
issue?
4 buses and a van,
So you have
but we
one.
do not live within the city limits.
Oh,
So therefore, that would be another situation. We are all outside of city limits. We're out in a subdivision out there is where we're at. So therefore, that wouldn't bother us. But I'm looking at another one now, so. But the other
So-
question is, I forgot right now what my other question was, so.
that's
I
all
think-
right. If you remember, you can come back.
Okay, thank you.
Um, You know, I do agree with the issue of allowing these to operate out of a residential area. And I know there's got to be some sort of within reason, and I'm not really sure just what that is. But I think, you made a good point when you saying if we required them to operate in a commercial area by leasing a building or owning a building, they likely wouldn't make it. And I think that's, we're just on our way to a point someday where maybe that would make sense as a requirement, but maybe we have to be a community of 40,000 people or 50,000 people. You have to have enough scale that support the businesses. It wasn't that many years ago where we didn't have any private taxi service, so I think we're in a transition phase, and I think our ordinances have to recognize that.
Mr. President, to hone in on that question, the ordinance would provide that the parking requirements would be allowed in the commercial, industrial, residential zones, but of course, parking a fleet in a residential zone would be prohibited. And then get back to addressing one of Ms. Patrick's questions. The cab ordinance, as it's drafted now, would require that the vehicle be identified by a decal issued by the city on a specific location of the vehicle, so that the people that are riding in the taxi cab, the passengers, can identify that numbered vehicle and use that for identification purposes as well.
Okay. Well, I think, you should further consider comments on branding about maybe requiring, maybe a more visible brand as opposed to just a decal.
If I may, I was going to wait to make some comments until after you close public comment, but
Well, I'll see. Is there anyone else that wishes to comment?
We're gonna be here all night.
No, we're not.
No, we're not. 'Cause I'm dead. I've been up a long time. Just on the branding thing, just the company name, that's super, super important. There's somebody driving around, I have no idea who it is, with taxi. It says nothing else.
Okay.
And it's a silver and red van. So I don't know, just having the company name visible on, usually, actually, I pulled this up for you guys. In a city that's roughly the size of yours, it's actually a little bit smaller. Their application for a taxi company requires an approved color scheme on file with the city clerk's office that does not allow for confusion between other already existing companies. Because it stops the confusion between somebody thinking I'm them and they're me.
Yeah.
And we actually had this issue with Minot Yellow Cab coming here because I have Dickinson Yellow Cab. And one of their vehicles, actually, it was a Malibu, and we don't have Malibus, so it was very obvious that it wasn't us, but ran through the airport gate and busted it. And the first person the airport called was us. One of your yellow cabs just, but it's a confusing brand when you have two of the same, they look identical, they say the same things on the sides, and people don't know who to call to complain. As for the taxi number, very few, I can tell you, I've been in this industry for 15 years, and very rarely, I've been on both, I've worked for a major dispatch company, and I have almost never heard customers call in a cab number.
Okay. I
They'll
think
give you the color.
Yep, I think you make a good point. So,
Okay, I'm done.
no, you're fine. I'm agreeing with you. But if you make us stay here all night, I could change my mind, so. Is there anybody else that wishes to comment? Okay, well, we'll let Mr. Kessel have what we believe will be the final comments unless he says something that you want to react to. So, Mr. Kessel.
We might be here all night if that's the established grounds. I first of all, I want to say thank you to Mr. Dillon, Ms. Patrick, and the others that have attended. They have been good. We've learned a lot. I personally have learned a great deal through this process, and they have been the teachers in a lot of the cases. So, and as she's mentioned, there are some points of difference or contention that were raised. The limo license was one of them. We recognize the concept that these limo license drivers have to pass a minimum standard, such as having a valid North Dakota license, not being a sex offender, and so on and so forth. Those things will be required in the ordinance. We did not go to the point of actually issuing a chauffeur's license. That could change in future versions. But I just wanted to make it clear that we did require a minimum standard that all of these licensed drivers have to achieve or meet. In terms of branding, there is requirements in the document today that does require that a cab be numbered and identified. Ms. Winkle and I were just talking that we think it is appropriate that maybe a magnetic sign, something in terms of branding be on the vehicle, but there was not consensus with regard to painting vehicles a certain color or even doors or things of that nature. Other owners were against that proposal. I think we can do things short of requiring a different color for each cab that would be identifiable by the general public. And on the inspection side, it was also very clear that we were trying to encourage the use of existing mechanics or shops in town. That's the traditional method by which most repairs happen or preventative maintenance happens already. I'm certainly not opposed to putting in language that if we can require a minimum review of certain items annually, and if that's provided to us, we can issue a seal. That may be a good idea, and then also then require or put in onerous penalties if they're not met, because it's just another level of time that someone in our staff will have to put in. So I think we've covered these items in our discussions and our debates. The things that are in the document represent, I think, consensus amongst the group. The things that maybe did not achieve consensus within the group are not included in here. So we'll continue to work and revise the document, but I just wanted to explain those points. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
I have a couple of things.
Mr. Jackson.
I'm reading the section on schedule of fares, and if I'm reading it right, it appears we're going to approve fares. Do we
Yes.
really want to do that?
Commissioner Jackson, our intent is to approve a maximum fare, but not fare. They can choose their own fares as long as they don't exceed the maximum amount. And that was a clear consensus amongst the taxi cab owners that they wanted us to provide some limitation on fares.
That seems odd to me. I can certainly understand filing the fare schedule with the city so we know what it should be, so the public will have a place to get it. That seems a little odd to me that we would approve fares.
It's actually a very common process in other communities. They went so far as to request that those fares be posted on the vehicle themselves so that any potential patron would know the approximate cost of the fare.
Well, again, I think that's fine. Okay, well, that just struck me odd. And then the other question, a detail thing, moving violation, Ms. Winkle, does that include speeding? Is a moving violation speeding?
Chief Dossinger, you wanna? Yes, it is.
So, we're gonna take a license away for a speeding ticket. You know, I think it's really good that we're trying to raise the standards here, but I really wonder about a speeding ticket.
I think what was raised in our meetings was that if there were 2 moving violations within a specific period of time.
I could understand that.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's what it says right now, does it?
Says 1 and 3? We'll review that specifically, but it's a good point. It was raised that two moving violations within a 1-year period.
That's all I have.
On that note, that was another question I had for you guys, was the speeding. A taxi driver is on the road between 12 and 16 hours a day and is 98% more likely to get a speeding ticket than anybody else. So every taxi driver has at least 2.
So,
We pull out of McDonald's parking lots and get seatbelt tickets because we just haven't thought about it, and we're in the car all day, so it's like we're in our office. So my question is, I mean, usually what happens is we get a speeding ticket, our insurance goes through the roof, we don't do it again. But that's something, it's almost like having a CDL. The DOT doesn't ding your driving record, the company that hires you does, because they don't want to pay more for insurance. So our insurance takes care of anybody that has a really bad
so
record.
what are you suggesting? Are you suggesting that there be more than 2 in a 1-year period?
I don't think, I've never seen a city pull a driving record.
Mr. President, I don't think that's something we want to get into. My experience has been that if the driving record is a negative driving record, they will be contacted whether that guy is eligible.
Yeah, we're not gonna hire somebody that's gonna make our
I'm gonna
insurance
be
go up
satisfied with
$5,000 a year.
us.
Excuse me, let Mr. Steiner
Oh,
make
sorry.
his point, okay? Mr. Steiner, would you try again?
Again, that problem will be taken care of through the insurance company that they work with. If they have an individual with 3 speeds, that company will flag, say, we do not wish to have this person as a driver. So that decision wouldn't be our decision. It'd already be made for them.
So you're suggesting that language, we may not even have to address that. And I think Mr. Steiner's point is a valid point. In our business, we employ truck drivers, and if they pick up too many violations, we hear it from the insurance company.
I'm glad, Commissioner Jackson, you did bring this up because it does bring back my recollection of the meeting. And I think that's the point that the taxi cab owners made, is that their insurance companies will require them to eliminate that employee from driving
Yeah.
because they're, yeah.
I
So we
think
can update the ordinance.
I think the only people that are exempt from that are the actual policy holders, and believe me, policy holders can be told that they can have a policy, but they cannot drive the vehicle too. That happens.
All right.
And they still pay that money.
Okay. Thank you. Other comments or questions here at the commission table?
Mr. President, I guess there's a couple things. The one thing I'm concerned about is, let me pull it up real quick, is the ability for the police officer to board the bus is one of the, do the people riding the bus waive their rights? Since it states in here that there will no need for a search warrant. So by them riding the bus, do they automatically waive their rights? Chief Dossinger?
Well, that's a kind of a legal question. I think
I guess.
we wouldn't expect the chief to answer that.
Commissioner Decker, we have indicated in the ordinance that, it would be required that the bus be boarded for the necessity to search the vehicle without having a search warrant. Of course, there might be differing opinions on that, and I can, most certainly research it further. I believe that this particular portion of this draft is representative of a draft that's currently in place in Bismarck, based upon Bismarck's ordinance. So, but I most certainly can look into that a little bit farther.
Wouldn't you have to have some probable cause to board? I mean,
You have, my criminal law is a little rusty, but I believe in order to stop the vehicle, there has to be probable cause to stop, and then if there's probable cause to search the vehicle, that can be done as well.
okay, but if there's no probable cause, there may have been probable cause to stop the vehicle, for example, a faulty taillight, but you can't use the faulty taillight, I'm assuming, to say I'm gonna go on board and see what's going on in that bus.
Again, Mr. President, my criminal law is a little rusty here,
Wow.
but again, probable cause to stop the vehicle, I believe there has to be probable cause to conduct the search, depending on what type of search is being conducted. If it is a vehicle search, but Mr. Dossinger can probably assist a little bit more on that one.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the commission. We would still have to have probable cause to search the vehicle, be it odor of alcohol, be it odor of marijuana. We would have to have probable cause to enter that vehicle.
Okay, is that addressing?
But by
it?
searching the vehicle, can the people get off and they're not subject to the search?
As far as the people would have to be asked to step out of the vehicle.
Because it says here you can search the vehicle, but it doesn't say anything about the people.
Okay, well, we would have to have reason to conduct the search
Right.
of the vehicle. Be a belief that there's minors drinking on the bus.
Right.
Or an odor of marijuana. We'd have to have something to go on rather than just searching the vehicle for no reason.
Commissioner Decker, are you asking, can the people be searched themselves?
Right, do they waive their right since we're gonna board the bus?
So getting on the bus and searching the bus is one thing, but if there's like you mentioned, an odor of marijuana, does that mean you can search the individuals as well?
We would have to have a reason to search these people. Just because these people boarded this bus, they're not giving up their civil rights.
Right, that's what my concern is. you
Correct.
know.
Correct.
And then I had another thing about the 21. I understand it's for insurance, but it's going back to if someone has a legal license, why shouldn't they be able to, at 18, operate if company wanted to hire them at 18? They're going to assume the liability on the insurance. And I'm just kind of going back to that whole thing with Uber. At one point, there might be the 20 required people, they want to run Uber in town. So they might be 18, 19, 20-year-old college drivers, college-age kids.
Commissioner Decker, this is one of the areas that I learned as we walked through this, but the cab owners informed us that you cannot, under the commercial insurance, hire someone under the age of 21. The insurance won't issue a policy for light drivers under the age of 21. So it's just a recognition of industry practice.
Well, if Uber ever wants to come here, I guess we'll address that then, so.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Decker. Are there other comments or questions? All right, we'll declare the public hearing closed. And I'll ask if there's a motion regarding first reading of ordinance 1583.
Mr. President, I'd move we approve ordinance 1583.
Is there a
First
second?
reading.
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Now, just want to explain something here, that just because we approve first reading in the form that it's written doesn't mean that it won't change between now and the public hearing. Staff will take the comments that they heard tonight from the public and from the commission, and they may make some additional changes at our next meeting. This will probably be on the timetable agenda as a public hearing, and you'll be free to comment, of course, on any of the old language or any of the new language, if any appears. So that's where we're at. Okay, well, we're moving right along here. We'll go to item H, and this is Public Safety Center Furniture Bid Package, and Mr. Kessel's going to introduce this.
Thank you, President Johnson. As part of the budget for the Public Safety Center, it includes several owner-provided items. The IT cabling contract was an example of that that you approved at the last City Commission meeting. These items are budgeted for owner-provided so that we avoid the admin markups and save money and not included in the CMAR process. Tonight, we are asking authority to bid numerous office-related products that will be included within that structure, such as chairs, desks, tables, file cabinets, things of this order. We are also, just as a reminder, using the standard AIA bid forms. We do require a performance payment and bond, and we do have liquidated damages of $500 a day if the work is not completed on a timely basis. That liquidated damages is there because we have informed the LEC of our approximate departure, and they do have a renovation plan and remodeling plan for that structure. So it's a way to help us stay on track. We've retained the right to reject any and all bids and or award or partial award of a list of items. The bid opening is planned for later this month, and city staff would recommend approval. I'll
So
stand
this
for any
is
questions.
approval of authority to bid this.
To bid, correct.
Any comments or questions by the commission? Not, is there a motion regarding the request for authority to bid this package?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. It brings us down to reports. Mr. Kessel?
Thank you, President Johnson. I promised you a report regarding the recent change from affecting counties and the state's financial responsibility with regard to social services. The state allocated $23 million that would be effective on January 1st of 2016 and go for the following 18 months. This report is compiled primarily from a conversation that I had with Mark Johnson from the North Dakota Association of Counties. There's a $3.5 million of that funding is reserved for impacted areas. Those counties that are levying more than 20 mills for social services. The ones that were mentioned specifically were Ramsey, Stutzman County, places where the state hospital, for instance, is located. They have a special burden because of that facility. Oftentimes around reservations, they also have an increase in social service needs. So that 3.5 would be directed specifically to those impacted areas, and they have to levy more than 20 mills for social service purposes. Another 19.5 would be allocated by caseload on the prior year's number. So depending upon which county has the highest caseload, they would receive the most funds. And there are a provision that requires them to roll back the mills commensurate with the amount of dollars that they receive. So every mill has a different value depending upon which county it is. Those dollars would be allocated, but there's a dollar for dollar, so to speak, requirement that the mills be reduced based on the state funding that they would receive. There is a study to further look at this and find out if the state can take on more responsibility with regard to social services. They estimate that if they want to do so, the current estimate anyways is another $140 million would be required. and they hope to complete that study and have it prepared before the next biennium legislature meets. So that at least gives you some details about expectations and financial commitments the state is making to the counties. The other legislative update that I'd like to provide is I've been working with Brent Bogar. He is the lobbyist that the North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties has hired to assist us with lobbying the legislature. He has provided me with an estimate of cost, or excuse me, an estimate of revenue that the City of Dickinson can be forecasted to receive based on a no big trigger and an average oil price of $63.60. If that's the case, then the surge funding we already have received, as was noted earlier by Deputy City Administrator Valesky, of $44 million. We would receive, in addition, a total of $90.6 million, and then subtract off of that the surge funding. So $29 million based on House Bill 1176 and the 1/5, and then another $14 million based on House Bill 1175, and then 1377 bucket bill would get about 3.2 million. So those funds can be used for bond payments that we are committed to. They can be used for general fund expenses and, of course, capital programming.
So that's over a biennium, that's about $46 million.
That's correct. And that is over biennium, yes. So about $23 million a year.
And that's essentially through what we'd call the formula bill.
Yes, yes. So we'll be plugging this number into our capital improvements fund. We already have prioritized our 2016 items, and this will give us a good measure of how far we think that we'll be able to fund, and then we'll bring that to the City Commission for your approval.
You realize that you won't be able to use all 46 million towards the capital improvements that.
Correct. I think, as I mentioned, that we'll use some for bonding and some for general fund expenses. So we won't use the whole.
Right. For debt service, you're going to have to allocate some for debt service and some for general fund subsidy, which is actually pretty significant. Probably close to half of it.
Yep.
A little less than half, but a good 40%. Okay.
That concludes my legislative report. And so I think the next item is an HR journal. We'd have HR Coordinator Nominat provide.
Good evening, President Johnson, Commissioners.
Good evening.
As we always start off, police officers, we have, actually I found out today, 2 openings. So we will start that process again and start advertising. We just had an opening for a records clerk, and we're in the background phase right now on that. An offer has been made. Sanitation labor, we do have 1 position open there that we have not advertised at this point. Sanitation operator, the position has been reopened, and I believe they were doing some interviews today on that one. Street operator, we are in the background phase on that one as well. We had 1 opening to fill, and an offer has been made. Wastewater operator, we actually have 2 openings there. That's for our wastewater treatment plant. Interviews will be held later this week for that. Accounting technician, we recently filled that position, and that new hire has been working for a little over a week now. Chief engineering tech and engineering project manager remain on hold, as well as a safety training coordinator. The engineering technician, just in the interview, we're in the background phase on that one. An offer was made today, so we'll start the background. City attorney position, we will start interviewing this week for that. We have some Limited hour and seasonal positions, we're doing very well with that. I think we've only got 3 positions open yet, and we're going to be doing interviews this week. So I'm really hopeful we'll get all those seasonal positions filled and ready to go real soon. That's all I have.
Well, it's a lot of activity, but I think the numbers are a little less than what we're accustomed
Yeah.
to hearing.
Yep, I agree with you. It's, the page isn't as long.
So, any comments or questions for Ms. Nominick? All right,
All right, thank you.
Mr. Kessel?
My last report of the evening then is to just inform you that Miss Natalie Pierce has resigned her position as a Planning and Zoning Board Commissioner. That was effective immediately. She accepted a position as a planner for Morton County. So that leaves 7 members on our Planning and Zoning Authority. I believe our ordinance allows for up to 9 members. It doesn't specify an exact figure of commissioners that we do need. So we will, as we traditionally do, we'll accept anybody who is interested. If they just go to our city website, complete a citizen's interest form, and then consider their application to be a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay.
Thank you. That concludes my reports.
Any comments or questions for Mr. Kessel? All right, then we'll move to public safety, and Chief Seevock will give the first quarter safety report.
President Johnson, Commissioners, as in years past, a portion of the agreement that we have with North Dakota Workforce Safety and Insurance under the safety management program that we're following requires that at least quarterly we bring to you at this level a status report of our safety program and of our employees and employee injuries. And so I do have before you the first quarter of 2015 summary report. We recorded 6 employee injuries, 2 of those requiring medical attention. None of them were lost time injuries. We're very fortunate about that. Sprains and strains is the leading type of injury that we see. This is a considerable decrease from this same time frame in 2014, where we had a total of 21 injuries reported by this time, with 4 of them requiring medical attention. This time of year is a time that we want to stress construction site and traffic safety to our employees. Proper flagging of work zones and the using of the appropriate personal protective equipment such as traffic safety vests, safety glasses, hard hats if appropriate, will be extremely important for our personnel in the field. It's also a good time to remind all of our personnel that every employee is responsible for safety, not just the department supervisor. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Are there any questions or comments for the Chief? All right.
Thanks.
And then from the Police Department, Chief Dossinger will be given a report.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the Commission. Section 2356-270 of the City Code does not allow for parking by employees, by employers in the downtown district. This is a difficult ordinance for the Police Department to enforce. The Police Department does not maintain an active list of downtown employees, employers, or the vehicles they drive. The Police Department would like the Commission to consider repealing this section of the City Code. I have spoken to Chrissy Schwartz, who represents the Downtown Association. They are not against this change. They will be presenting a downtown parking plan to the Commission in the future to consider. I anticipate that part of that plan will involve time parking spots and a diagonal parking plan.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. You've heard his request. This is on as a report, so we wouldn't be taking action on it, but I'm sure he's looking for feedback from you as commissioners. If on the surface you tend to agree or disagree with his request. So.
No problem with it?
Okay, we got 1 no problem.
2 no problem.
2 no problem. So if you get 1 more, I'd say you could bring it to us, you know.
Correct.
Okay, we got 3 no problems.
Okay, we'll be bringing it to a future meeting.
There you go. Okay. so we go to engineering, and Mr. Kubas has several items here, and we'll let you just start with them and introduce them, and we'll take action.
Thank you, President Johnson, Commissioners. The first item we have under engineering is a right-of-way agreement for 40th Street. As you know, several months ago, we had a round of right-of-way agreements that we were able to sign. This was not one of them. As construction commenced on 40th Street, we did resume negotiations with the property owner, and this is the property that houses Two's Construction right now. These agreements would convert a 17-foot road easement to essentially a full right-of-way, dedicated right-of-way that we can put water and sewer in. We're able to build the project without this dedicated right-of-way, but feel for posterity's sake, when we need to go back in and do some work, the right thing to do would be to have this agreement in place. I've met several times with the property owners there's actually 2 parcels there that house Two's Construction right now. We are in agreement to the terms of this. The purchase price to convert that existing easement to dedicated right-of-way would be at the appraised price. And additional construction-related items that we've discussed with the property owner would be at the property owner's expense. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get a signed document in time for this meeting, but I believe the agreements that you have in front of you are the final. We had to change an address on one of them, and I wasn't able to get it signed, but I think if we could approve this tonight, we would have the signed documents from the owner within a day or so to bring it back for city signature.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kubas. Ms. Wenko, can we do what he's requesting even though the other party hasn't signed?
I don't see any problem doing that, Mr. President.
Okay. All right, any comments or questions for Mr. Kubas on this item?
I'll move we approve the agreement.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so the motion carries. Item B then.
Item B is the recommendation of concurrence to award the project. On May 8th, the DOT had bid our State Avenue Railroad Bridge project. It's been several years now in the project development stage and design stage. That project was estimated a construction cost of $20.2 million. The DOT had received 2 bids on the project. The low bid was from Ames Construction of Burnsville, Minnesota, at $24,722,640. The city's share is now estimated at $2.783 million, of which $927,000 would be covered by Burlington Northern Santa Fe. They pay that portion to the city, and we in turn pay that to the DOT. It would leave a city share of $1,856,000, or about 7.5% of the construction cost. City staff would recommend concurring in this award. We would then forward that on. The DOT, as this was bid through the DOT, makes the final decision on recommendation of award, however. That I'd open it up to any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Kubas. Comments, questions? Mr. Kessel?
Just wanted to inform the commission that through 2 different projects associated with this on our capital improvement plan, we have adequate funds or have planned for these expenses that the city is required to cover.
Any other comments? Would there be a motion to concur then?
I concur.
There's the motion to concur. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Well, this is a really good thing. We've waited a long time for this, so if the state DOT goes along, do we have a sense of when we might start to see some activity over at the site?
Well, I think activity would have to start very soon. There's a very tight time frame. Although it's going to be a 2-year project, I think construction would start very soon, 1st of June or the middle of June. They have some timeframes to meet some Burlington Northern requirements. They're going to be installing several new tracks crossing State Avenue, so it's going to be a real coordination effort to get some of the road work finished before that track work can happen. And I would anticipate that the actual bridge work would start late this fall, go through the winter, and then completion would be in 2016.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Thank you. We do have the motion, so we'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries.
The next item is on our 2015 mill and overlay project. We'd received bids on that project on Tuesday, May 12th. The engineer's estimate was $3.84 million. City had received one bid from Northern Improvement Company in the amount of $3,944,121.10. City staff recommends approval of the bid from Northern Improvement Company.
And is this to be funded by the street fund?
This would be funded by that $4 million transfer to the street fund. Correct.
Any other questions or comments? Is there a motion regarding this bid?
Move we approve award of bids.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
If I could, I see we have queued up the truck route report. So if I could jump to report item 3, the 8th
Okay.
Street South truck route report. We had met and had some citizen concern on the adequacy of 8th Street as a truck route. So here's, there'll be some facts and figures and some maps showing what we have and what we don't have, so. As you remember, last year, we had adopted through, I believe, through an ordinance, an official truck route. And the truck route we have designated is in blue. Look at my pointer here. So anything in blue was officially designated as our truck route. The area in red on Highway 22 in prior years was officially adopted as a no truck route. And then one route we had talked about limiting the trucks was Villard Street. That isn't, I don't believe, officially anywhere in ordinance or resolution, but it was discussed at the time. So 2 meetings ago, we had talked mostly about the truck route on the south side of Dickinson. Again, it's 2 routes, 8th Street southeast and 6th Avenue east, and then out to the business loop, the east business loop, or 8th Street southwest, State Avenue, and then out on the west business loop. Yes, they're both right there. We'd also talked about internally as staff saying, if we eliminated one or the other of those routes, we'd still want vehicles or trucks a way to get back to the east or west. So if we designated State Avenue as the truck route on the south side, we could have those vehicles get back onto the east side of town on Broadway or on Villard, and vice versa. If 6th Avenue East was the truck route on the south side of town, those trucks could get back to the west on Villard or Broadway. So we ran just a quick aerial photograph survey of the area to see what kind of impacts we would have existing today or as current as the aerial photography is. So we looked at how many single-family homes there are on those routes. The first column here is 8th Street southeast, that truck route, the entire loop from Highway 22 on 8th Street southeast and 6th Avenue back up to Villard. That goes past 16 homes. If you take the southwest truck route, 34 homes along State Avenue and 8th Avenue southwest. On Broadway, and that's going all the way across town from State Avenue over to 6th Avenue East, there's 40 homes along Broadway and 9 homes along Villard in that same stretch. looking at multifamily dwellings, and this is an approximate number on my part. There's 6 units with, or 6 structures with 14 units on the southeast bypass, 2 on State Avenue, 1 on Broadway, and 6 on Villard. Of course, we have some in the planning stages right now, so those numbers could fluctuate for all these routes. You can see that the next row is the amount of businesses located on those routes, of course, dominated by the businesses along Villard Street. The miles are approximately equal. Again, if we would direct trucks only to the southwest and then back across town, we would have to add up a couple of these numbers. So instead of 1.6 miles to get, or excuse me, 1.7 miles to get to the southeast route, or 1.9 miles along the southwest route, you'd have to take, say, 1.7 miles and add it to add 1.6 miles. So it'd be a little more, quite a bit more indirect. The next row is the surfacing conditions. Most of these would be, I'd consider them good to fair. 8th Street, the asphalt section of 8th Street South is by far, I would say, the worst condition of all of those routes. No real schools along there. However, DSU does have their arts building along Villard, and a couple public uses, St. Joseph's Church on Broadway and the downtown park on Villard. So just giving you an idea of what we have out there for impacts. Again, and Mr. Kessel and I just had the opportunity to meet with the DOT, and truck routes came up in that meeting as well, and everyone agrees if we all had an endless pot of money, we would build great truck routes that bypassed all of our cities and bypassed all those impacts. Of course, this on probably the inside chance is a 10-year out project. 10 to 20 years, I'd say, would be reasonable. But we do have these projects. We've shared them with the DOTs. I think they're reasonable. But if we would implement something like this sort of a bypass right now, we would probably be a little bit ahead of the problem. So we also collected, and I shouldn't say we, the police department had collected crash data on the 2 routes, the southeast and the southwest route. So this is the total crashes. This is for a 3-year period, I believe ending at the first of the year. So if there's some recent crashes, they weren't collected in this data. But a lot of these are intersections or stretches of 8th Street or State Avenue. The total crashes along the southwest truck route would be 67 crashes in a 3-year period. Again, predominantly focused on 8th Street South and Highway 22 and State Avenue and Villard. In comparison, the southeast truck route, again, these 25 crashes right here are the same 25 that are in the other route because they share that common intersection at Highway 22 and 8th Street. Total crashes on that route would be 51 for that same 3-year period. We've also collected some data. By we, again, I mean the police department. And this data was collected through the speed boards that you see up in town. They put a speed board up. The collection date was April 6th through May 4th. Just to get an idea on the counts for the vehicles there, this is per day. There was a board that was out on Wednesday for about 10 hours. So throw Wednesday out. This is only in one direction. The average is about 1,325 vehicles in one direction. So assuming we have as many people traveling east as west on that road, we have about 2,650 vehicles on an average day. Those speed boards also obviously collect speed data. And this is a printout, an hourly count for each day. The hours of every day is right here. And I guess the number I would point out to you is in the bottom right-hand corner. The average speed collected for every vehicle is 28 miles an hour. Again, this is posted at 25. The 85th percentile speed, which is the speed at which 85% of the vehicles are traveling at or below, is 32 miles an hour. I think these are are reasonable numbers. When I saw the data, this is right in line with what I was expecting to see for our speed data. So we looked at some alternative solutions to address those speeding concerns. One that was brought up at the last meeting was stop signs. What I'd point out is the MUTCD, which is the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, it does state, this is the guidance that's given in the manual, is that stop or yield signs should not be used for speed control. Other concerns I would have with stop signs or creating a four-way stop there would be really increased noise due to the starting and stopping of any vehicles, trucks especially, and the increased pavement damage due to the braking forces. And we've seen that on a lot of our intersections where trucks or any vehicle coming to a stop and they really rut up the pavement right before that stop sign. Another option to address some speeding concerns, and I don't have a lot of familiarity with these chicanes, would be you could either build this into your street or stripe it like it's shown in this photo. Is you have a straight street it's a through street with no stop signs. What can you do to slow vehicles down is to introduce a curve on an otherwise straight street. Pretty obvious how that would help to slow some vehicles down. Another option to control speed, often referred to as a traffic calming device, is the bulb outs. Typically, I would recommend these in an area where we have high pedestrian traffic, because it obviously makes that pedestrian crossing shorter. We don't have a lot of pedestrian traffic crossing 8th Street that I'm aware of. These can be quite difficult too for our maintenance crews. When we have a good snow, boy, you sure don't want to forget that bulb out is there, or we do a lot of damage to our curb and gutter, and it makes it difficult for the snow removal folks. There's also some consideration for noise, and we do have, I couldn't give you the date, but we do have 2 signs on 8th Street Southeast that call out no engine brakes. The one is right at the intersection with 6th Avenue, and the other one is mid-block, probably in the 300 or 400 block there. I did note that we don't have no engine brake signs as you're coming into town, and that is a recommendation I would make. There we have vehicles that are being required to slow down from 65 to 55 to then 35. It probably makes some sense to work with the DOT and get some no engine brake signs on Highway 22 South as you're coming into town. So with that, that's my short report. Some information to share with you, and I guess I'll return to my spot and open it up to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kubas. Very complete. Any comments or questions for him?
President Johnson, if I could add, just one comment. At the same evening that we had input regarding this, we also had dust control issues that were brought up because of a pile, the spoil pile located on the south side of that street. Building and enforcement has addressed that. They're putting up, and it's probably up now, a fence that'll be erected, if it's not 6 foot high, with slats to minimize the amount of dust being blown, and they'll lower the spoil pile itself. So hopefully that will help address some of the issues of blowing silt and sand.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kessel.
Mr. President, Commissioners, Jerry Vance, 325 8th Street Southeast. Mr. Kubas, I do have a question for you. On that speed report, did you look at the high average speed? That was listed at 43 miles an hour. Also, the number of violations for the speed report was at 81%. Now, if you take the high average speed, posted speed limit on 25, you're looking at 18 miles over the speed limit on that. Now, also, when this was set up on one direction, the signs were all up there that basically we put up that asked please slow down. So some of those numbers are actually going to be a little bit skewed. They're probably lower than they actually should be. And then also where that sign's set up, it's going to reflect all the numbers of the people that are turning off of 8th Street Southeast into Meadows, which is a fairly significant number also. So, they're slowing down to make that corner when they're picking them up on the radar. And then also on the noise portion of it, You mentioned something about the Jake brake sign. Basically, there was no comment or anything made with any of this when you talk about the vehicles and the amount of them with straight pipes. And on those numbers of vehicles that are driving by there, you know, if you're looking at 8,000 vehicles is what they were looking at in that 1 week period, 8376 is what I showed. You were looking at over 2,000 of those in that time frame, you know, or over 30 to 45 mile an hour. You know, so they're in excess of, you know, 20 mile an hour over the speed limit. You know, so some of the safety factors, that stuff you had forgot to point out with that. I'd like to just make sure you're aware of that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt.
There is an extensive speed report, all the data that's
Yeah.
compiled by this. I just shared with you. In the engineering world, we use 85th percentile for speed studies, and there's, I'm not sure what the high average, what the definition
It
of
showed
that
us
is.
43 on the sheet that I looked at.
I understand. I don't know what the definition of high average means. Average is the average. 85th percentile is 85% of the vehicles drive lower than that. I don't know what the high average was, and that's why I didn't include it. But we can share all the information with you. I guess, like I said, from the average speed and the 85th percentile speed, that was numbers that I was expecting to see. Yeah, we hope and we wish everyone drives 25 on every 25 mile an hour posted street in Dickinson. I don't think we would see dissimilar data on many other 25 mile an hour streets similar to 8th Street. That was, I guess, the point I was trying to make with the speed data. But there might be other considerations. This is just one point on 8th Street. So if there's turning movements.
Yeah, excuse me, but you can look at, you know, several of these reports, and you can look at it one way and garnish some of the information off it. I look at some of the other stuff on it. I'm concerned with the high speeds. I mean, if you looked at it every day, you were looking at 47, 35, 35, 38, 38, 47, 44, 41, 47, 56, 44, 50, 44, 47, 44, 41, 41, 47, 41, 38, 47, and 35. So that's the high speeds that they're picking up on an hourly basis in that report also. So, you know, you're looking at significant amounts over the posted speed limit too.
You understand his point, though, that
Yes, yeah, yeah.
statistically, 85% of the vehicles going through there are driving 32 miles per hour or less.
Correct.
Okay,
Yes, but 81% of those are also a violation if you look at the posted speed.
right.
Look at the numbers.
But when
But
you-
you look
if-
at 32, and like I was trying to explain, the numbers there, you know, some of these vehicles are slowing down before they actually get to the radar sign. And we also had stuff up there that was actually trying to get them slowed down. And I hope those radar signs are actually, you know, that's what they're made for, is to try to get people to slow down too. So those numbers, you know, should have reflected a little bit of the speed being lower than it actually is. So, no, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Kubas, would you continue with your reports?
I can. If we can jump back to report number 1, there's another map that I'd like to share with you for the city services to Sundance Village. And I say Sundance Village, but in fact, based on the citizen concern we had last meeting from Miss Ermentrout, she actually lives on Sundance Drive, and that's the red area. Should have grabbed the pointer again. But the red area, there you go, is a little, I want to say 10-acre out parcel that was annexed into Dickinson when the large gray shaded area, Sundance Village, was annexed in. And so the question was raised about providing city services up to that subdivision. That's the very northwest corner of Sundance Village. And down a mile lower than that on 21st Street, there's an orange line and a blue line, and that's really where our city services are the closest to Sundance Drive. That's approximately 1 mile away. Like I said, we don't have a project in our CIP program to extend services any further, to extend services to the north up to the Sundance Village subdivision. So it would require an extension of some water main and some sewer main approximately a mile to the north. The other thing to point out, I show kind of a diagonal line in there with pressure zone 2 and pressure zone 3. Currently today, we don't service pressure zone 3, and this is something that came out of our water modeling. just due to the elevation, because the very corner of Sundance Village, you can see that white dot on the map is actually the Southwest Water, there's a water reservoir sitting there. So that's on the top of Radar Base Hill. And we don't have the pressure available to service the higher regions. So not only would we have to extend a water main up there, we would also have to put in some sort of booster pump to get the pressures up to that higher elevation. That's really all I had with this presentation. If there's any questions that you might have, I apologize, I didn't put a dollar figure to what this could or might be, but needless to say, a mile of water and a mile of sewer with a booster station would be awfully expensive.
Well, this helps a lot. Now, this is all above or north of 21st Street. There is no development that's taken place there.
Not in the Sundance Village, no.
When we annexed that into the city, we expected fairly eminent development to begin.
That would have been the expectation.
Right, and so now there's been no development. So is this something that should be, if there's going to be no development there, does it make sense that it remain in the city is my question.
Well, I'm sure from other departments' standpoint that there would be a benefit in having it not be in the city limits. Engineering, we just work with maps and lines on maps, so it's not really an encumbrance to our department, but Public Works has to run out there if there were ever utilities. I know Fire and PD are now responsible for that half section.
But that,
and no development.
The corner that there is a structure, the anticipation would have been that the developer would have developed that property, brought water and sewer services to the north, and at some point it would make economical sense to offer those services to that property. But as it stands today, it doesn't make sense.
It really doesn't. I think Ms. Ermentrout said there was, I can't remember if there was 10 or a dozen homes in that small existing subdivision, and to run services for a mile for 10 homes is very, very difficult.
We don't, right now, I'm assuming we have no indication from the developer that they're going to move forward with that development.
I sure haven't heard any of those.
Mr. Kessel, do you have any information?
I'm just going to make the commission aware that I am meeting with this developer tomorrow morning, and we're going to discuss this very topic that you're bringing up. So I think the conversation is apropos.
Okay.
So if there's any further questions on the Sundance City Services, I could answer them now, or I can move on to the next report item.
Well, I think you can move on.
We'll move on then. I had gotten this preliminary engineering report for the Fishers Eastside Second Subdivision Special Improvement District to you a little bit late. You have a hard copy in front of you. We weren't asking for any action today, so hopefully in the next couple weeks you would have a chance to review it and comment on it. If you do remember, several years ago, I want to say 2012, 2013, this was an infill development that occurred. The developer had applied for city development impact fees at the time, a program no longer used. The intent of that project at the time was to put in water, sewer, and streets on Lincoln Street, Carroll Street, 15th and 16th Avenue. When funding fell short, 15th and 16th Avenue were left off. The paving of those two streets were left off. Water and sewer is provided throughout this subdivision. Everyone has city services, but 15th and 16th Avenues remain unpaved, or at least a portion of them. So I guess the two things to call out is based on some comments we had from when those assessments, I'll call them, from the impact fee program were levied. We did have some comments where the owners of the remainder, the southern portion that would be serviced by 15th and 16th Avenue, had asked for some consideration, the feeling being that they would have high specials now. So we put together two districts in this report. One that just touches on the southern half of the development south of Carroll Street. The other one encompasses the entire development as it was originally proposed as an impact fee project. The total cost for paving 15th and 16th Avenue, and I should add there's some storm sewer on Carroll Street as well. The total cost for that is $555,000. That's the estimated cost. You can see there's a breakdown of the fees per property based on each one of those options. These are always difficult projects, and my concern is that if we try and spread the costs out and bring in a lot of properties, the project would be voted out. This would be a protestable special improvement district. The other option, option 2, which limits it to the southern property south of Carroll Street, the assessments get rather large. And so it's a tough project. These are always tough, these impact fee projects. I would note too that Lot 4 and Block 1 is left out. It had always been left out of the original projects as well. Before the impact fees were applied for or this project was being developed, Lot 4 had an approved street, had water, and had sewer. So Lot 4 was always left out of the districts. So right now, this is in report format. My intent would be to bring it back to you with any comments that you might have, but bring it back to the commission at the 1st of June meeting to either create or not create the impact district, or the special improvement district, sorry.
Okay, give us a chance to read and study it. Mr. Jackson, you have a comment?
Well, I remember we did have a lot of discussion about this project with developers, and I don't remember what the result was anymore, but I thought we had come to some philosophical consensus about how we were going to do this. Am I wrong in that?
On how to fund or assess the remainder of the paving?
The boundary of the improvement district, basically.
You know, we can probably go back through those recordings of the meeting. It was at the assessment, or was it? Maybe it was at the commission meeting.
Oh, it was here.
Yeah. Okay.
It was here, and I thought we had tacit agreement, but I don't remember what that was.
Well, we'll review that, and my understanding was that there was just that there would be consideration given to those remaining to have their streets paved, because understanding with a condensed district, those assessments per block or per foot would tend to get pretty high.
Okay, well, if we can try to recreate that, regardless, nothing's going to be solved by delaying this any further. So one way or the other, we should proceed.
Commissioner Jackson, just to address your earlier comments about tacit approval, we did. We actually thought we had this project done, and then we had a owner who actually owned a couple dots pull out at the last minute, and we had consensus at that time, and because that owner pulled out, we didn't move forward with the project. That's my recollection, anyway.
Okay.
Okay, other comments? Okay, Mr. Kubus, do you have any other projects to update?
Well, I do, but I think I'll turn them over to Assistant Engineer Marshak.
Okay.
Good evening, President Johnson, Commissioners. I have a few brief updates on our capital improvement projects this evening. The first one is 10th Avenue West from 29th to 40th Street. That project was primarily constructed last year, but we had a few punch list items to get completed, and those are now finished, and we will be going out on Thursday to do a walkthrough and hopefully wrap that project up. Another project we have going is the 24-inch west dedicated water main. That project needs the connection into the water treatment plant, and then that section of pipe has testing to be done for treatment and pressure testing. Otherwise, they're just finishing up with cleanup, and so that project seems to be on schedule. They do have some pavement patching to do on West Broadway, which might require a road closure, but otherwise, that project's coming along well. East Broadway has the east side water distribution, and East Broadway is now open to traffic, but we're doing some temporary water connections from South Main to First Avenue Southeast this week. 40th Street utility improvements.
Could I interrupt you?
Oh, yes, sir.
Broadway, so when do we think that we'll be patched and ready to go on Broadway? Is that a midsummer possibility?
I know on West Broadway, things are coming along pretty good, and I think that's a good estimation. East Broadway, we've, last meeting I mentioned where we had the pipe sited to go in one location, and we found out that there was already one there. So I'm not sure how long some of those kinds of things are gonna hold our project up. So I sure can find out if we have a better completion date and update you on
Okay.
those. 40th Street is still closed from the hub east to 4th Avenue East, and they are installing utilities along with some of the storm water piping. State Avenue is closed to through traffic from 21st Street north to 40th, and they're working on grading and installing water main. 21st Street is closed west of State Avenue to 30th, and they're getting that construction underway. We have the Highway 22 landscaping project. They've been out installing trees on that one. We've had a few substitutions, but otherwise that's been going well. We have a couple booster stations, the east side water main tank and those ties to go along. Those plans are coming along and are being finalized. And along with that, we have the urban road section on State Avenue from 12th to 21st. Those plans have been finalized and sent to the health department, and we've set a bid opening date of June 4th at 3 p.m. Mountain Time. And that completes my report this evening. Do you have any questions for me?
Any other comments or questions? All right.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Kubis?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Go to Public Works. Mr. Zuroff, you have 2 or 3 items there. We'll let you take those.
Thank you, President Johnson and Commission. The first item I have is the West Gravity Phase 2 bid award. This project extends sewer from the Phase 1 project just south of Exit 59 north to 15th Street West along 30th Avenue West. It includes boring under the interstate and 30th Avenue West. Original estimates for this project was $1.8 million, which had the sewer on the west side of 30th. The sewer line was shifted to the east side, which added another boring and increased the bury depth. Final construction estimate was $1.932 million, and that included a 15% location factor. The bids were opened Thursday, May 14th, and the low bid was from Oakland Construction for $1,829,425.90. Staff recommends awarding the project to Oakland Construction contingent upon final approval by the North Dakota Department of Health.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zuroff. You've heard his report and his recommendation. Are there any comments or questions? Not, would there be a motion regarding this bid award?
Move to approve, Mr. President.
There a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
My next item is the Bryan Facility bid award. Those bids were opened on April 22nd. 3 of the alternates included a cold storage building and options to add a concrete floor and some electrical work for the cold storage building. The low bid came from Two's Construction with a total, including all alternates, of $1,354,000 and $600, excuse me, $1,354,600. The brine machine and the tanks are to be purchased direct and were not included in the bid, which would increase the project costs. So we had some other items that we were going to purchase separate from the bid. The CIP dollar amount carried for this project was $1,250,000. With that dollar amount, staff recommends to award the single prime bid for Two's Construction and not include any of the alternates but E1, which is the fiber, and the brine building of $908,000 for a total cost of, where do I have it for now? $918,600 for Two's Construction, and with all the brine building, the machine, the tanks, and contingency with the architect, it brings the total cost of the project to $1,249,016.
So you're essentially, you got the project to the budget, but you're leaving some of the alternates out.
Right. Thank you. Yes, we did look at the cold storage building and some other items. We're planning on selling the Baker building and increasing staff at buildings and sites and moving forestry. Forestry is out there. So we were looking at some additional cold storage area for basically buildings and sites and forestry and some outdoor storage of pipe. We were hoping to get that included into the CIP dollar amounts, but it doesn't look like we'll be able to do that.
So you'll probably address those needs in some future year?
Plan to maybe next year, maybe we can go a portion at a time, some coverage or some cold storage, or at least roof for some piping and some other items. Hopefully we can budget for the future.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? So,
Mr. President,
go ahead.
I do. Mr. Zuroff, so your total is $1,249,016, and so the base bid of $908,400, plus you want to add alternate E1 for $10,200, $918,600.
Correct.
Where are you picking up? Where are we picking up the other?
Those costs, along with the brine machine, the brine machine is estimated at $80,000.
And that's not in these bids.
No, these are separate items that we're buying. So I included the other items that we had to purchase: the brine machine, the tanks, the contingency, and the architect fees to keep it into that.
So those are about $300,000.
Correct.
And those those items would have been in the CIP number of $1,250,000. So, okay. But they would have had some of the other things in that $1,250,000 that they're not going to buy right now.
Okay, so if you can bear with me here.
That's fine.
On the general construction, what's the difference there? I see one at $847,200, and then alternates G1, 2, and 3. And we come up with $1,313,000, which would exclude $300,000 for the brine machine and so on.
On these, bidding with the multiple primes has been difficult for me here, but if you look at the single prime on Two's Construction, the base bid is $908,400. On the general construction bid of Coling and Coling, it's $847,200, but that does not include mechanical or electrical. So with that $847,200, you have to add $98,000 for Berger and $77,000 for Central Mechanical to make that comparative to Two's single prime. Okay. And that's $113,000 $800 over Tews's single prime bid.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments, questions? All right, if you agree with Mr. Zuroff's recommendation, I think the motion can simply be to approve his recommendations and award the bid to Tews. And his recommendations include all the numbers. You don't have to do it again.
Yeah, and I apologize for the confusion, but there, with multiple primes and trying to fit it in the CIP dollar amount, I was trying to explain it the best I could.
I think we got it.
Okay.
Mr. President, I do have one other question.
Okay.
Low bidder was quite low, left quite a bit on the table with that bid. Have you been able to have a conversation with that bidder? Is he comfortable with his bid? And
Yes, in fact, Mr. Kessel and I met with Tews Construction, and I think he's comfortable with the bid. There is not a lot of, it's a pretty straightforward building.
Okay.
I think we had some discussion about maybe areas that we could cut costs, but being a pretty straightforward, minimal building, there's not a lot of areas to cut costs, or it didn't seem like there's a lot of areas that he could have missed for the bid.
thank you.
If I could add to that, Commissioner Jackson, the architect was also present and agreed. The builder suggested that because it is a steel building, there really wasn't, we asked him two things. Number one, did you catch everything? Are you comfortable? And then after he said yes, we asked if there was anything he could value engineer out of the project. And again, same response. It's a basic building. So in other words, I guess we're not expecting change orders as well.
All right, any other comments, questions? Is there a motion regarding this item then?
I'll make the motion to approve building of the facility.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have the motion and the second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
No?
Chair votes aye, so the motion carries. Mr. Zuroff, you have some reports?
Unless you have some other questions on some of our projects, the only thing I have is a street fleet annual report. Brent Coulter, our street manager, will give a quick review of the work done this last year with the street department. The street department now includes fleet division and the buildings and sites. It was difficult to have indicators for our annual report. This is the first annual report for the street fleet, buildings and sites. We have some hours, man hours included in the different years. You'll notice, and I noticed, for example, the hours used for this repairing the streets is lower than last year. That doesn't mean that we didn't want to get out there. It means that we've had a lot of turnover in the department. There were other things that the staff had to deal with, and last year we moved along with including these other divisions. So I'll let Brent Coulter go through the presentation.
Mr. President and Commissioners, first page you're going to see is basic overview of sweeping, which is one of the most popular items within the city and the Public Works Department. As you can see from the pie chart below, the majority of our cleanup is caused because of the sand that is used during the wintertime. We are doing everything we can to try to eliminate the use of sand because we also want to stay in compliance with our MS4 requirements. With the use of the new brine building and brine machine and tanks that you just approved, that's going to give us the big push to get away from sand and hopefully leave the streets a lot cleaner than what they are right now. Currently, I have 2 operators and 2 brooms that are out running on a continuous basis. between the amount of sand that we've used, which was for 2014, and that does not count what we used in the winter part of 2015, 1,872 cubic yards of sand. Coming into the spring when construction starts, then we start getting a lot of the mud and stuff that's tracked out onto the road, which also compounds it. Also, what we'll be helping at is in our 2015 budget, we currently have a bid out, and we will be opening it next week for a new vacuum broom, which will cut down on the amount of dust. Quick overview, though, part of the services that we require, that we are required to do are road repair, snow removal, ice control, street sweeping, equipment maintenance, public works setup and maintenance. We also assist other departments as needed. Traffic control, sign and striping has also been moved into the street department. This next slide will show you street cleaning hours and where we've been running, and it's been pretty consistent all the way through. In addition to that, this new broom that we'll be purchasing, since it is a vacuum broom, it'll be equipped similar to the one that's in the picture with a nozzle on the top. That'll increase and let us become more efficient in our leaf program. Currently, right now, it takes 3 operators to go out and clean up for the leaf program for 2 to 3 weeks. And last year, after we ran the dates of 3 weeks in the month of October, it seemed that we had to extend it another 3 weeks because of the late leaves and yard cleanup. The pie chart below covers our dirt work hours. Dirt work for us last year mainly consisted of picking up where contractors left off. What that pie chart does not tell you is the amount of material that we used last year. We completely exhausted the city stockpiles of crushed asphalt, crushed aggregate, and crushed concrete. Just trying to maintain it through this last winter and the current spring. With the rapid freeze-thaw cycles, it's been a nightmare trying to keep these roads in one piece and open to the traveling public. As of 2014, the City of Dickinson and Street Department maintains over 130 miles or 368 lane miles of public roads. This information is based upon the report that's provided by the Pavement Management Plan that was created for us by Dow HKM last year. This does not include West Ridge nor any other developments that have come online since this report was completed. Because of this new pavement management plan, we've actually gotten pretty aggressive on our mill and overlays and also our chip seals. We do have some warranty work that's going on this year from the chip seal that was performed last year. Some of the areas that failed, that did not hold, contractor will be coming back in. He came in last month and for about 3 weeks was picking up aggregate that was constantly unraveling from the roads. They will be coming back, I'm expecting within a month, to start the repair work on those and finish that up. Also on this, we also do a lot of other street patching as far as potholing. Now, because of the rapid freeze-thaw cycles that we had during this last winter, at a recent conference I was at, I was talking with other managers from other cities all over the country. It seems this winter is just basically decimated roadways all over. We're not the only ones that are dealing with the problem right now. The more severe areas, we had to dig out and pack with crushed concrete, hopefully to get them to dry out. Our current supplier of hot pavement just started producing pavement 2 weeks ago. With the weather that we've had, we haven't been able to go out and patch, but we started this morning at 6 o'clock, reopening those holes, drying them out, and we will be paving the rest of the week. And we will continue until all those patches are done. For the 2014 year, a total of 3,239 man-hours were used for the ice control and snow removal. As part of the 368 lane miles that the street department maintains, 35 of those miles were received as part of the new truck bypass highway. In order to be able to take care of that bypass highway in the wintertime for snowstorms, the street department purchased 2 new tandem axle snow plows. Also included in this is within the next 60 days, we will have an updated route map that will give our level 1, 2, 3, and 4 roads out, and hopefully we will be able to post that on the website for everybody's future reference. Striping and signage, along with all the additional lane miles that we've picked up, plus trying to bring up to date some of the older striping and signage within the city limits. We currently have 1 full-time sign specialist and 1 part-time sign specialist. We also installed 3 4-way stops, 3 new 4-way stops.
There was probably more like 6, I think.
Quite a few.
Yeah. I'm going to go with a half a dozen new 4-way stops throughout the city. It has been a very hectic 2014 season. 2015 is starting to calm down, and things are finally starting to come together. But between the building move, shuffling departments, and moving personnel and adding equipment, we were moving at a very rapid pace last year. As you can see on the bottom, street painting or striping and signage, all of that has increased greatly. A lot of our street signs throughout the town need to be upgraded because they do not meet reflectivity, and a lot of them have becoming worn and faded. So what we've done is we've broken the town up into sections, and we're going to try to do a section a year until we can get everything upgraded. Banners, flags, and Christmas decorations. Every year, this does not go away. One of the other duties that also that we take care of is the installation of holiday decorations, banners for the events, the American flag for holidays. For the 2014 year, we used 157.5 man-hours. For 2015 year, the street department has ordered new Christmas decorations to replace the old and broken decorations, and that amount came to approximately $17,000. As you can see, the numbers going down. As far as man-hours, we're becoming more efficient in the way that we're doing it, and hopefully it will remain that way. The city also recently implemented a new fuel system and fuel system software out at the new Public Works building. That allows us to buy fuel at very discounted prices at a bulk rate. Initially, there were some hiccups with fuel keys getting switched from vehicle to vehicle, but I think now, I don't think I've had a problem reported to me, at least in the last 3 months. Everything seems to be working very well. Everybody has access to it. We also use the mileage reports. Part of the deal is when you go to fuel, you have to insert your fuel key, you enter your driver ID, you enter the mileage from the vehicle, and then it allows you to pump your fuel. Well, that mileage that you enter into the fuel system gets transferred over to our new fleet software. That also helps us maintain the current status as far as services go. Our new fleet maintenance software, we have installed 90% of all the city's equipment into this system. And when I say 90%, all the vehicles are in, but we also use it to track other items such as our boat motors or small pumps or gasoline generators. The fleet maintenance software tracks all expenses associated with all the ownership of all city vehicles and equipment, tracks maintenance performed on the vehicles and equipment along with any costs involved The one thing that it does leave out is our warranty work. Now, currently, if our mechanics have to perform any warranty work on any of the vehicles that we have, we actually generate an invoice for that dealer or that vendor, and we send the invoice directly to them, and they turn around and pay it back to us. This feature also allows us to view the maintenance cost trends and schedule replacement for vehicles or equipment with a higher than expected cost of operation. All of our parts is tracked through this software. We also receive automatic notifications on parts and services when they're due. Right now, everybody is currently up and running on this, and I believe we're running probably at 80% efficiency right now, and within the next 90 days, I would expect us to be at 100%. In summary, being the manager of the street department as well as the fleet department, I also have the buildings and sites department that has been assigned to me, as well as the custodial and the forestry department. Building and sites is responsible for 10 buildings, which include City Hall, Public Works Building, Museum, Library, Safety Center, wastewater treatment facilities, Administration Building, the Armory, the Baylor Building, and the Baker Building. In addition to the buildings, they are also responsible for the city cemeteries and approximately 100 lane miles of sidewalks and right-of-ways. That concludes the report for 2014.
Thank you, Mr. Colter. Are there further questions or comments for him? It sounds like there's quite a workload there.
There is, and it's not going to go down.
No.
And this last year was a lot of change. I mean, including different departments moving. We're continually trying to improve and implement the new software. So last year was a changing year, and this year will be a learning year, I think, as far as implementation of everything.
We have a lot of new employees, and out of all the employees in the street department, 3 I would call seasoned employees. The rest of the operators that I have within that department have been with us for less than a year or less. So the learning curve has been very, very short. But I'm glad to say that the guys that we do have are sticking around, and they are learning very quickly.
Any other comments? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Zurov?
Not unless you have questions.
Okay. Well, then we'll move to planning. And Mr. Hadley, you have 3 items. We'll let you take us through each of them.
Yes, sir. President and the Commission, Roar, it's a PUD. It's requested rezoning from agricultural to plan unit development. It's ordinance 1575. It has some conditions of approval. It was approved by staff and the Planning Commission, and it has some exclusions of use. And those are listed in the actual ordinance. Those are all agreed upon, and there hasn't been any comments.
And there are no changes from first reading?
No.
Okay. So this is ordinance 1575. If there's anyone from the public that would like to comment, you may do so now. Just come to the podium, state your name, we'll hear your comments. There's no one from the public. Any comments by city commissioners?
Move we approve second reading of 1575.
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Jackson, Mr. Altman, Mr. Steiner.
Aye.
Mr. Decker.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. You may proceed.
Yes, sir, thank you. Second item is Nelco. It's ordinance 1576. This is to allow the expansion of petroleum storage and to legitimize the existing use. It's an 11.2 acre site. Planning and Zoning Commission and city staff have recommended approval, and there haven't been any changes or comments. This is also a second reading.
So at this time, if anyone from the public would like to comment on ordinance number 1576, you may do so now. Come to the podium, state your name. We'll hear your comments. There's There's no one from the public. Any comments by commissioners?
Make the motion to approve second reading and final passage of 1576.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so the motion carries.
South Park, third edition, second reading also. Ordinance 1577, it's a 4.5 acre site. It's a rezone adjacent to property to build garages. They were initially intended in part of that project. There's a survey error, and this legitimizes the garages back onto the property that they were envisioned to be on when it was approved the first time. Staff has reviewed, approved with the Planning Commission. It is also the second reading.
All right. This ordinance number 1577, anyone from the public that would like to comment, you may do so now. Come to the podium, state your name, hear your comments. There's no one that wishes to comment. Any comments by city commissioners?
Mr. President,
Yes.
move to approve second reading and final passage of ordinance number 1577.
I'll second.
We have the motion, the second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Oldman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. You may proceed to item B, Mr. Hadley.
Yes, thank you, sir. Northern Place Affordable Housing, it's a ordinance 1578. It's a affordable multifamily housing plan, a request for rezoning from community commercial to limited commercial. It's a 2.3 acre site. Planning Commission and city staff have recommended approval, and there haven't been any changes since the first reading.
All right, so this is ordinance 1578. Again, anyone from the public wishing to comment, you may do so now. Come to the podium, state your name, hear your comments. There's no one from the public that wishes to comment. Any comment by city commissioners? Would there be a motion regarding this item?
Move we approve second reading, 1578.
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. So you can move on to item C, middle school property.
Yes, sir. Middle school property to construct a new school, ordinance 1579. It's a rezoning from agricultural to public on a 30-acre site. The commission, planning commission, and city staff have recommended approval. Also the second reading, and there hasn't been any other comments.
Okay. So is there anyone from the public that would like to comment on 1579? You may do so now. Come to the podium, state your name, hear your comments. No one from the public? Any comments by city commissioners?
Mr. President, move to approve second reading and final passage of ordinance 1579.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Hadley. Anything else?
No, thank you, sir.
All right, then we'll move to, there's an annexation, and Ms. Winkle will introduce this item.
Mr. President, Commissioners, this ordinance provides for the annexation of the property located easterly of the 30th Avenue West and southerly of the 21st Street West. The annexation area would also include the recently acquired right-of-way 21st Street West. There are 3 landowners in the annexation area: the state of North Dakota, the Dickinson Public Schools District, and the August Philippi Land Trust. All property owners have petitioned for annexation. This is the second reading, and there have been no changes since the first reading. And I just will point out that this operates in conjunction with the new designated urban service area agreement. So now this would be included as well and be annexed into the city.
Okay, thank you. Again, anyone from the public wishing to comment on ordinance 1580 may do so now. Just come to the podium, state your name, we'll hear your comments. No one from the public wishes to comment. Any comment by commissioners? Is there a motion regarding this ordinance?
Motion to approve?
Second.
We have the motion to approve and the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. So the motion carries. That brings us to commissioner comments. Any comments by commissioners?
Just very quickly, we have this letter in front of us from the Townhome Association. Is that going to be addressed? We don't need to discuss it tonight, but just,
Mr. Jackson, I wasn't provided with the letter, so I can't address it.
Commissioner Jackson, I received a copy of that letter today, and I think we'll address it at our Wednesday meeting. I haven't had much of a chance to look at
yeah,
it either.
just so we address it.
Anything else by commissioners? All right, is there anyone from the public who wishes to address the commission? If so, come to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the commission. You've had a long night, and I won't keep you longer. My name is Peter Welty. I'm an attorney from up in Grand Forks with the Vogel Law Firm, and having spent most of my career as a city attorney or a state's attorney, I appreciate your patience tonight. I represent Jan Perkel and some downstream landowners from the Cooks subdevelopments that you have in town here. Your attorney, Ms. Wenko, was kind enough to entertain a phone call of mine earlier today, and we were out on site, myself and the landowners and little team that we have, and I thought that I would stop by tonight and just place a face with the name. That's my only purpose for being here right now, and I'll reach out to Ms. Wenko. There's been a prior dialogue between your council and my client about some unresolved drainage and degradation issues that are adversely affecting my client's beneficial use and ownership of their property. I just, as I said, I'm here to represent her and just placing a face with the name. And I think that after being out there and getting some history on this and seeing the paperwork that's been assembled, I think a sensible fix should be reasonably attainable. To that end, I'll be working with Ms. Wenko and your city staff. Mr. Kessel, you and I met a couple years ago in Medora at the North Dakota States Attorney Association meeting, and I've followed the growth of your town and your city since then. But as I said, my whole purpose is just to introduce myself. I'm sure you're wondering why the goofy-looking guy in the blue shirt is sitting in back enduring your 3+ hours. But if you have comments or questions, I'd happily entertain them.
Any comments or questions? All right, thank you. Anyone else from the public wish to address the commission? Not, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We're adjourned.